Being after 9 o'clock, I declare open this meeting of the Senate Environment and Communications Legislation Committee. The Senate has referred to the committee the particulars of proposed additional expenditure for 2020-21 for the portfolios of agriculture, water and environment, industry, science, energy and resources, and infrastructure, transport, regional development and communications. The committee may also examine the annual reports of the departments and agencies appearing before it, even if no additional appropriations have been sought. The committee is due to report to the Senate on Tuesday the 20th of April 2021, and it has set Friday the 7th of May 2021 as the date for the return of answers to questions taken on notice. The committee's proceedings today will continue its examination of the communications outcomes of infrastructure, transport, regional development and communications portfolio and examine the NBN code. I wish to remind senators and witnesses that we are operating in an environment affected by COVID, which put limits on the number of people allowed in the room and the number of senators who can be seated at the table at any time. Senators, departments and agencies have been provided with advice on the arrangements in place to ensure that the additional estimates 2021 hearings are conducted in a safe environment. This guidance is also available from the Secretariat. Under Standing Order 26, the committee must take all evidence in public session, and this includes answers to questions on notice. Officers and senators will be familiar with the rules of the Senate governing estimates hearings, but if you do need assistance, the Secretariat has copies of the rules. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a committee. The Senate, by resolution in 1999, endorsed the following test of relevance of questions at estimates hearings. Any questions going to the operations or financial positions of the departments and agencies which are seeking funds in the estimates are relevant questions for the purposes of estimates hearings. I remind officers that the Senate has resolved that there are no areas in connection with the expenditure of public funds where any person has a discretion to withhold details or explanations from the Parliament or its committees unless the Parliament has expressly provided otherwise. The Senate has resolved also that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked to the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. I particularly draw the attention of witnesses to an order of the Senate of 13th of May 2009 specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. Witnesses are specifically reminded that a statement that information or a document is confidential or consists of advice to government is not a statement that meets the requirements of the 2009 order. Witnesses are required to provide some specific indication of the harm to the public interest that could result from the disclosure of the information or the document. Officers called upon for the first time to answer a question should state their full name and position for the Hansard record, and witnesses should speak clearly into the microphones. I now welcome Senator the Honourable Jane Hume, Minister for Superannuation, Financial Services and Digital Economy, representing the Minister for Communications, Urban Infrastructure, Cities and Arts, and portfolio officers. Minister, do you wish to make an opening statement?
No, thank you, Chair.
Also welcome Dr. Sokalski, Chairman and Non-Executive Director of the NBN Co. I believe this is your first appearance at estimates in this area. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Thank you for the opportunity, but no, the CEO is going to make our opening statement.
Mr. Rue, in that case, welcome. I invite you to make your opening statement and then we'll go to questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And I think we have distributed the opening statement, or we have
distributed. So if you'd just like to summarise it, then that would be
I will. I'd like to go through it if I could, Chair. So good morning, Senators. With me this morning, as you've just stated, we have our Chairman, Dr. Ziggy Sokalski. We have our Chief Financial Officer, Philip Knox, our Chief Operating Officer, Catherine Dyer, and Brad Wickham, our Chief Customer Officer. We will obviously rotate chairs as and when we're required to answer questions. Before I start, though, I'd like to let the committee know that Dr. Sokalski does have a prior commitment in Melbourne this afternoon, so will need to leave the hearing at 11:30, if that's okay, Chair. We now have more than 8 million premises, or approximately 17 million Australians, connected to the NBN. This is a major milestone for the company, and I'm proud of the people, both past and present, who've helped us reach it. Of course, we could not have achieved this without the support of our retail partners, our delivery partners, and many others across the industry too. And I'm also proud of the way that the people of NBN pulled together in difficult times, whether that be during fires, the pandemic, or as we are seeing this week, the floods in New South Wales. We are working closely with emergency services and power suppliers, and we continue to monitor the situation closely, and we'll support in any way we can. And Catherine is happy to talk more about our response to the floods later, if requested. Completing the volume rollout last year was an important moment in the history of NBN Co, but it's also an important moment for the future of the network. As our corporate plan makes clear, our work is not done. The network will continue to be upgraded and improved as the way Australians and businesses' use of high-speed broadband evolves. The network upgrades announced in last year's corporate plan are now well underway. Designs have been developed, and we have identified and allocated contracts to delivery partners to commence work on the first 200,000 premises in the fibre to the node network, where the higher speed tiers will become available. More than 46% of HFC customers are now able to access NBN Home Ultrafast, up from 7% in May last year. So we are on track to deliver NBN Home Ultrafast broadband to up to 75% of premises on the fixed line network by 2023. Now, there are two important issues I want to touch on this morning. Firstly, we were asked in a number of questions on notice to provide financial forecasts out 4 years to 2024, for example, on operating expenditure. We have provided that information in the past, but it wasn't in the latest corporate plan, and I just want to explain why that was. As the Department of Infrastructure noted in estimates on Tuesday, the information we provided meets the GBE guidelines for the content of corporate plans. In fact, we provide far more financial information in our corporate plan than other GBEs. Historically, that has been appropriate for Australia's largest infrastructure project in the build phase, with all equity and debt provided by the government. But a significant turning point occurred last year when we completed the initial rollout and we started raising private debt to replace government debt. For these reasons, we made a number of changes to the information we provided in the last corporate plan, but we did not make those changes lightly. Since the early days, the company was slated to raise private debt when it reached a certain stage of maturity. The 2010 Statement of Expectations said that NBN Co has been established as a wholly owned government business enterprise with the intention that at an appropriate time, NBN Co will raise debt on its own behalf. End quote. So going out to the debt capital markets, however, brings a new suite of obligations and limitations. It is well understood in financial circles that forward-looking statements need to be limited because projections that extend out multiple years are, by their nature, speculative and could be misinterpreted by the market. As you know, forecasts depend on a range of assumptions about future events happening or indeed not happening, and they are subject to change. Publicly listed companies, which are also subject to very high transparency obligations, typically provide only one-year forecasts because there is generally little objective or verifiable basis for long-term forecasts. Essentially, if, like NBN, they operate in a dynamic, competitive, innovative market where there are too many factors that could impact results. And a very important point to understand is that forward-looking statements could impact not only the terms and conditions of debt issuance, but also how the bonds trade on the secondary market. NBN bonds trade over the counter and at any given time represent the fair value of NBN credit. As NBN approaches global debt markets and issues bonds, investors will look to the trading level of NBN's outstanding bonds to guide their views on pricing for any future bond investments. Forecasts or revised forecasts could be used by investors to drive up the price of the credit and force NBN to lock in higher than necessary borrowing costs. This is not in the interest of NBN, the Australian taxpayers, or our customers. And also, once we start issuing bonds, long-term forecasts could expose NBN to liability because investors could argue that NBN intended investors to take the forecast into account in making their investment decision. This could make NBN potentially liable if, for example, the trading price subsequently falls and investors argue that they relied upon NBN's forecast information. We are, of course, going through the intense and time-consuming process of preparing to approach global debt markets. We are working closely with expert advisors very familiar with this type of debt raising in foreign markets and the protocols around it. We are, of course, acutely aware that we are 100% government-owned, and as we repay the government loan from private debt, we need to remain as transparent as possible. We want to provide all that we legally and reasonably can without putting the company at risk of any claims or increased borrowing costs. This is not about putting debt holders ahead of the Commonwealth, nor is it about reducing transparency, but about protecting the Commonwealth investment in NBN and ensuring we can obtain the best possible terms and conditions during the debt issuance process. The other important issue relates to reports of damaged equipment during storms in our FTTC network. We're very focused on the impact of lightning strikes for our customers, particularly in areas like the Blue Mountains. Over the last few months, through some significant storm events, we saw higher than expected fault numbers on the FTTC network in particular geographies. We quickly set up a group within our engineering team to investigate, and we also retrieved damaged devices for analysis. What we are finding is that this is a complex issue. It is not a simple case of lightning travelling down a wire and tripping a fuse. There can be multiple ways that lightning can affect any equipment, but a common cause in these cases appears to be what's called earth potential rise. This is a complex electrical issue. When lightning hits the ground, it creates a potential difference between ground and the neutral power connections in premises connected to an NBN distribution point unit. Many of the compromised NBN devices appear to contain components that fail when subjected to these particular conditions. Our suppliers have said to us that the components in this scenario fail in a safe way, but that also means the broadband connection to the home is lost. There have been reports from some customers of black marks on devices and sometimes outside the device on a table, for example. Our suppliers confirm to us that multiple units with this marking have been inspected and that these black marks present no safety concern. We know, of course, that the affected NBN devices have been certified under applicable Australian safety standards. Establishing these points in safety has been our first priority. We are very aware that there has been a poor experience for some of our customers in these areas. As we look for a more long-term solution, we have been doing what we can to reduce outage time for affected homes. We have heightened our operational response in these areas. We have added more technicians ahead of forecast weather events and ensured we have inventory on hand so we can move quickly to replace equipment that has been damaged in storms. With our retail service providers, we are also actively trialling a self-restoration plug-and-play kit posted directly to impacted customers, removing the need for wait for a technician visit to restore their service. These are temporary measures, of course, and we continue to look at options to strengthen our devices. For example, potentially replacing some customers' equipment to minimise the impact of lightning on our network in these regions. So there is no doubt that the past year has been critical for the future of NBN Co. We completed the volume build of the network and we commenced work on the most significant and ambitious upgrade plan in our short history. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic was accelerating the digital needs of homes, businesses and schools. In my view, consumer behaviour and the way we socialise and work have been irreversibly changed, and the role of reliable, high-speed broadband has never been more important. With this in mind, the team here today and all of us at NBN Co are acutely aware of the role we have to play in supporting communities and businesses through Australia's economic recovery. So with that, our chairman, my team and I are happy to take your questions. And thank you, Chair, for allowing me to read that opening statement.
Thank you very much. Senator Urquhart or Green, who would like the call?
I'm happy to kick off if you like.
Senator Urquhart.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr Rule, and thanks for that update, particularly around the flood response. And I guess I want to put on the record Labor's acknowledgement of the significant effort of frontline workers and operations staff across NBN Co, Telstra and Optus and Vodafone during these natural disasters.
Thank you very much, Senator.
We are fortunate to have good telecommunications industries in Australia that takes responsibility seriously, and I know it must be very difficult for those workers out there at the moment in the field.
It is indeed.
I just want to kick off with one thing, and I raised it last time, and I'm disappointed that Gavin isn't here today, Gavin Williams, because I know we had a discussion about King Island. It feels a bit like deja vu. It feels like West Coast. So King Island's on the northwest coast, up on the top, but it is sort of adjunct to the west coast of Tassie. We talked about they were obviously on Sky Muster. We talked about the difficulties that they experience on the island. I know Gavin has been in touch with them by telephone, but I do have an email confirmation here that Gavin was prepared to visit, and COVID unfortunately got in the way. So I just want to put on the record today that I will contact Mr Williams again and set up a meeting so that we can get over onto King Island to talk about it. I've done a survey on King Island. This is a copy of the surveys that I've got back so far, and the vast majority of them talk about the lack of service, the dropouts and a whole range of things. So I really would appreciate an opportunity to spend some time over there talking
Yes,
to...
Senator, I know he was planning to go, as you quite rightly say, and he will go, and he'd be delighted.
And I will contact him early next week and see if we can set up a date. So,
no, please do. Thank you.
So today I just want to start on the topic of pricing, and I guess, Mr Rue, as you'd be aware, there's understandably a lot of frustration and anger out there amongst the retail service providers. And I think the industry feels that they aren't being listened to. Now, I listened to your statement and you've talked about a number of things there. But I think there are legitimate constraints and challenges that NBN Co need to balance in approaching pricing. I think there needs to be a sustainable business model and a revenue profile that allows you to generate cash flows and invest in business. You need some leverage to ensure that retail providers are looking to upsell customers onto faster speeds rather than downselling customers. We understand the importance of having leverage to shape the market outcomes and the interests of customers, but there's been an expectation that once the initial rollout was completed, that there would be room to provide industry with greater certainty and pricing that was less complex, and that doesn't appear to be happening, I think, from that frustration that we're hearing from providers. And while retail providers have been forced to shed jobs and pursue efficiency programs to adapt themselves to rising wholesale costs, they pick up the newspapers to read that taxpayer-funded monopoly, whose cost base has gone from $29.5 billion to $51 billion, to $49 billion to $51 billion, and now $57 billion, just paid itself $78 million in corporate bonuses during the peak of an economic recession. So I'm hoping that here today we can have a frank discussion, a frank conversation, because the industry does deserve a good response than I think at the moment they're receiving. So I'll kick off with some questions around and that discussion around CVC, capacity pricing, and the industry calls to scrap the CVC and move towards a flat access charge.
Well, Senator, we have Brad Wickham here today, actually, who will be very happy to answer all these questions. I can obviously comment too, but we may just change chairs.
Sure, that's fine.
And then Brad, you might answer the Senator's question, if you could.
Well done, Catherine.
You did a good job.
Senators, can I also just highlight the fact that we've specifically asked the Chair to be here today. He has to leave by 11:30, so any questions that are going to be directed to the Chair, if we could front load those.
Mr Rue made that comment. The committee has advised us and we are aware of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you confirm it's feasible for NBN Co to move towards a flat access pricing model while maintaining its revenue and ARPU objectives?
Yeah, so maybe if I could provide a little bit of context around where we are within the pricing model. So as you mentioned, one of our primary objectives is to have that sustainable business model so that we can continue to both operate the network and invest in upgrades as and when appropriate. We have been working very closely with industry through a number of pricing consultations over the years, and we're currently just in the midst of a major pricing consultation right now. We are in a user pays model, which I think is the fundamental principle that we're applying. So we're not looking for a handout from the government. We need to make our revenues off the users, and in our case, the users are the retail service providers. And when you get into telco, it can seem quite complex. If you step back from it, really we're charging our retail service providers for just three things. One is how many customers they put on the network. Two, what are the speeds that those customers are operating at? And then three, what's the aggregate amount of data that's being consumed during the busy hour? And it's that third point, the so-called CVC, which is the area that's getting the most focus right now through the pricing consultations and has historically. And the assertion from the industry is that this is a variable cost. It's difficult for them to therefore predict, and it introduces uncertainty into their business, and we fully understand and appreciate that uncertainty. On the flip side, it does actually cost more money in order to upgrade our network to be able to accommodate more and more data traffic over time. So those are kind of the two forces that we need to balance, is the industry desire for certainty, but also NBN having a model that allows us to recapture the revenue and therefore put that back into the network to support that consumption. So within that, we have been, over time, reducing that variable portion that retailers pay by going into a so-called bundle model, where we take the speed tier plus the capacity and we put them together and offer that up. So the variable portion of our revenue is going down dramatically, therefore the variable portion of the retailer's cost is also going down. We've also seen that the unit cost, so the cost of that, the data that we're providing to retailers, has gone down by more than half. So over the last 3 years, we've taken that down from 33 cents per gigabit down to 15 cents per gigabit. So we are driving our unit cost down. Of course, offsetting that is the fact that consumers are using more data.
Sorry,
We're also
Mr. Whitcomb?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, you've got Ms Dwyer in front of
sorry.
you, so I just wanted to check that was actually you. So I just want to, sorry, I'm happy for the information, but
Yep.
given that we do have limited time, can I just draw you back to the question? And my question was, can you confirm that it's feasible for NBN Co to move towards a flat access pricing model while maintaining its revenue and the average revenue per user objectives?
So I think it's difficult to answer that with a straight yes or no. I think I would answer that as it depends.
Why is it difficult to answer with a simple yes or no?
Because there are many different elements that we would need to put into a forecast to be able to have confidence that a flat pricing model would deliver the revenue necessary to absorb the additional costs that could come with that.
So are you then saying that it's not feasible for NBN to move towards that flat access pricing model?
I say it depends. It depends on a number of variables. We are very open-minded to.
Surely there's always.
Order. Senator Pratt, please let the witness answer.
Surely if the revenue is
Senator
similar.
Pratt, please let the witness
That's
answer.
fine, we're happy to tag team. So you're saying that it depends on the variables?
It depends on the variables. It depends on what that flat price would be. It depends on whether there's any sort of a escalator or de-escalator that's associated with that over time. It depends
But
on
in
the speed
terms
tier
of,
mix.
if I can just break it down to, if you were, I guess the question simply is it feasible for you to move towards a flat access pricing while you maintain your revenue and your average revenue per user objectives? So if you just put it in the basis of those two that I've asked in the question, is it then feasible to move towards that flat access pricing structure?
It's possible.
Right.
Can I ask, what is it more complicated than what you do now? Because what you do now is pretty complicated.
Well, again, we charge for three things, so number of customers, what speed tiers they're on, and how much data they consume. I think if you look at most utility services, you'd find something quite similar. So it's electricity, you connect. If you've got business needs, it might be quite demanding. And then how much do people consume? Do they leave the lights on at night? Do they turn them off? So it's
Yeah, but we
very
also
similar.
regulators also fix prices for water, for electricity, to make sure they're affordable for households.
Yeah.
And, you can't turn the level of consumption down so low that people don't have enough water to drink. So in a sense, you have to balance out how you create that access. And we know you juggle this, but flat pricing can be part of that.
So just on the affordability, if you look at since the NBN has started to take some scale in the market, so you go back around the 2014 timeframe, once we started to really roll out in earnest, we've seen the retail price of telecommunication services go down by a third. If you look at the entry level, we have seen the entry level price for consumers go down from $66 to $57 at a retail price. I'm aware of more than 20 retail plans in market that are less than the $60. So we are
I
seeing
think we'll
intense
get to
competition.
some questions around that later if we've got time. But in terms of this, you said this was possible within those objectives. So are you saying then that NBN Co have modelled this? Has there been modelling done around that?
Well, we're inviting from the industry right now.
No. I've
ideas
asked you, has NBN Co done modelling around this? You're saying, you just said it was possible, so has NBN Co done modelling?
Yes, we have.
Right, okay. So has NBN Co at any point provided retail providers with a schedule of prices across its different speed tiers for a flat access price that would meet your revenue objectives?
Well, this is a dialogue between retailers and the NBN, and I think that you would
but
find
have you
that-
actually provided that with the schedule of prices across the different speeds to those providers?
I'm not aware that we have now.
Right, okay. So when CVC pricing was initially established, one of the key objectives was to provide flexibility on entry-level pricing during the migration phase. So since that time, the CVC constraint has evolved, and the use of bundles means that CVC is now primarily used as a tool to nudge or strongly incentivise retail providers to move customers onto higher speed plans. Is that a fair characterisation?
The CVC is designed to reflect the cost that the NBN absorbs to provide additional capacity to customers. That's the intent. So we charge for speed, number of customers, and then the consumption, and CVC is the vehicle for that. Now we have been recognizing that retailers are looking for more certainty. We've taken large steps in that direction, including providing a 2-year forward roadmap of what inclusions will look like, and with the use of bundling, putting in substantial capacity with our speed tiers to reduce that variability for retail service providers. So this move in the direction of a flatter price, I would argue, is already occurring because the variable portion that retailers are paying as a percentage of the total has gone down dramatically over the last several years.
So you've recently said you expect data growth to continue at 25% per annum. There is concern that the CVC bundle inclusions proposed by NBN Co in its roadmap are not sufficient to meet that rate of data growth. So can you explain from your perspective, how does the proposed CVC roadmap accommodate this data growth?
So I think there's two elements to that. So one is, what is the absolute increase in inclusions? And every time we increase inclusions, to be clear, we're continuing to drive down that per unit cost. So if you think about it like water or electricity, we're lowering the price each time we do that. And we've again, in this consultation, we're proposing to do that yet again. But the speed tier mix also plays a large role in this, because as customers move up to higher speed tiers, or as retailers purchase higher speed tiers from the NBN, typically there's a much, much larger data inclusion with the higher speeds. And the reason that we do that is we understand that higher usage or higher speed customers tend to look for more consumption. So we have to look at it as a portfolio view. If customers continue to demand higher speeds and a portion of them continue to move up, then the additional inclusions that are associated with those higher speeds will more than keep up with the growth in data consumption.
So just going back to the question about the provision of the modelling to the retail providers, can you tell me why you haven't provided that to the retail providers, the modelling I'm talking about? So you said you'd done modelling. Why haven't you provided retail providers with that modelling on a flat access price and a schedule of prices across speed tiers? I guess the question is, what have you been discussing with providers over the past 4 years if you haven't presented them with any numbers?
So this is a dialogue between us and the retailers, and to think about, what we have 65 primary retailers right now. They all have different profiles in terms of what their customers are consuming, what they think is going to happen in the future, the speed tiers that they're on, et cetera. So there is no blanket, we can run what if scenarios until...
But sorry, Mr Whitcomb, I don't want to cut you off, but I guess the issue is you've done modelling that looks at, a flat access pricing model. Why then would you not have gone out if it can maintain your revenue and your ARPU objectives? Why then haven't you gone out to discuss that with the retail providers?
Well, that's a consultation. That's exactly what we're doing, is we're looking at the current model.
So you
and
have
if there
told
are
them.
other models.
You have discussed that modelling with them.
We have
Because I thought you
discussed.
previously said you
We have
hadn't.
discussed various alternatives around how we might structure our pricing going forward.
It sounds very evasive. I'm sorry, Mr Whitcomb, but you either have discussed that modelling with the retail providers in that last 4 years or you haven't.
We have discussed various alternatives to how we
Have you
would price
discussed
going
the
forward.
modelling that you talked about?
There's not a specific model that I would point to
So the
and say
question
this
is- the
applies
answer
to
is
all
no.
retail service providers. So the answer is we do not have a model that applies to each of the 65 retail service providers.
No, but generally you have done modelling. Have you discussed that modelling with the retail providers?
We have discussed the idea of moving more in the direction of less variability
Okay, so the
and
answer
less
is no,
fixed
you have
costs.
not discussed that modelling.
I'm not sure what the question is.
The question is, you talked about you had done modelling.
Yep.
My question is, have you discussed that specific modelling with the retail providers over the last 4 years?
We do not have a specific model for each of the 65
I'm not
retail
asking you
service
about a
providers.
specific model for each of the 65. I'm asking if you have given that modelling and discussed that modelling with the retail service providers. I take it from the way that you're answering that the answer is no. You have not discussed that modelling with the retail providers.
I do not believe we have provided the retailers
Thank
with
you.
a mathematical model to that extent now.
Thank you.
Senator, can I just explain? There are 65, as Brad said, different retail providers.
I understand that. That wasn't my question, Mr Roux.
Senator, if I could, please. The fact is that the dialogue is held with each individual retail provider, which all have different levels of usage, different customers on the network and different outcomes. So it's not possible to take one specific answer and go, here you are. The purpose of consultation, which is exactly what you're asking us in the middle of a consultation with the industry, the purpose is to go and have a dialogue with the industry, each individual retail provider, and discuss various things, including pricing. Now, if you look at our consultation paper, it's very clear that we talk about the willingness to talk about the construct of our pricing centre. But if I could just make a few points, the CVC concept is not unusual in a utility. If you take electricity, for example, usage is very much a typical charge. So this is not an unusual model in a regulated industry. It's also important, Senator, to point out when it comes to pricing that one of the objectives of the NBN business model way back in 2009 and 2010, one was to create a better economy and better society, but the other part was to create retail competition. And what we have seen in the retail market is a large reduction in prices in the retail market, including at the lower end. One of the benefits of CVC is that the low usage.
Mr Rue, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you there because we have a lot to get through. I understand about CVC.
Well, if I could just make one point though, Senator. One of the benefits.
Very quick.
Yes, I will be. One of the benefits of CVC is allows the lower usage customers to have lower pricing and therefore lower retail pricing. That's a very important construct to understand.
Okay. All right, so the government's recent backflip on copper means NBN Co will need to engage in additional spending to in effect build a residential fibre distribution network in parallel with the existing fibre to the node network. So can you confirm that this additional spending increases the revenue that you need to earn for cost recovery? And can you confirm the additional fibre also increases your ability to grow revenue?
Yes, Senator. So there were several aspects to our additional investment that we announced at our corporate plan. You're referring to a part of the $4.5 billion additional investment. Some was for regional Australia, some of it was for business, but the specific one you're talking about, I think, is the extension of the fibre deeper in the FTTN, or the fibre to the node footprint.
Yes.
So the intention of this is to have increase the commerce of not just the utility to Australians, but also to increase the value of the NBN asset. Yes. So by expending expenditure to pull fibre deep in the network, and then to build the lead in when a customer orders a higher speed, the intention of that would be to over time increase our revenues, yes, to reduce our operating expenses as well.
Yeah, okay. So it seems strange that your residential average revenue per user target means at $49 per month by 2024, as it effectively was in the prior corporate plan, despite the additional spending from the government's copper backflip. If you're spending at least several $1 billion on overbuilding the network, then your ARPU requirement will go up. So there's a view in some segments of industry that $49 per month by financial year 2024 is not the ARPU that NBN Co expects or is working towards internally. So can you confirm that you expect the residential revenue will surpass $49 per month by financial year 2024?
Well, Senator, as I said in my opening statement, I don't wish to go into long-term forecasts. However, what I would say is that
it's not that long-term at the moment, Mr. Rue. It is now 2021.
Beyond this year, then, Senator. Don't confuse pricing and ARPU. The intention, and also remember that this is a long-term business. So when you look at an infrastructure business, you've got to look at an infrastructure business over a decade, not over 2 or 3 years. The pulling of fibre deeper into the network is an additional investment to drive additional revenues, yes, and to drive and to reduce operating costs long term, and obviously to provide greater utility to parts of the community who wouldn't have been able to access the higher speeds. But it's over a long period of time. So our expectation is that more customers will order higher speed tiers over the next decade.
But Mr. Rue, did you not forecast that in your corporate plan?
Senator, we're talking about a decade. We're not talking about 2 years. We're talking about. Remember, infrastructure spends is meant to be spent for a long period of time. That you don't. If you build a road, you don't get. It takes a long time for the cars to be on the road. It's the same with the telecommunication network or any a rail line. You're talking about a long period of time, Senator. So in the long run, there is no doubt that more people will require and will order higher speed tiers. But
in relation to the residential revenue, do you expect that will surpass $49 per month by the 2024?
Senator, again, as I said in my opening comments, I don't want to put projections on that goes beyond this year. But what I would say is that I would expect that more customers over time will order higher speed tiers. and that will drive revenue.
Mr Rue, the 2020 corporate plan says, and I quote, residential ARPU is expected to grow from $44 in financial year 19 to $49 in financial year 23, stimulated by an expected increase in consumer take-up of plans based on higher wholesale speed tiers. And that was made before the copper backflip. Then after that copper backflip, the 2021 corporate plan, the report states residential average revenue per user is expected to grow to $49 during the corporate plan period, which runs to 2024.
And Senator, I've answered you.
So how is that possible?
Because
how could NBN Co be spending more money overbuilding more fibre, but then simultaneously claiming your revenue expectations have been scaled back? It doesn't add up.
Senator, it does add up. I've answered your question. The additional spend will be spent over the next 3 years. The benefits of that will be felt over a decade. And beyond.
How does NBN Co guarantee that a situation won't arise, as Telstra describes, that options in the pricing review leads to a residential cost per user of $55 per month for the industry?
I don't understand where Telstra comes with that analysis, Senator. I'd have to. I'm sure as part of the consultation that Brad's talking about, that they will talk to us about that,
Mr.
and we
Whitcomb,
will.
can you shed any light on that question?
I just saw that this morning, so no, I haven't had an opportunity to speak with my colleagues at Telstra. That will come out as part of the consultation.
And that's the purpose of the consultation, Senator, that we will have those discussions with Telstra and their assumptions that lie.
So, won't the two options presented in the consultation paper, that is an access price freeze with CVC overage or a $2 access price increase with less CVC overage, simply lead to higher retail prices?
So in either event, we are actually increasing the inclusions and continuing to drive down the cost per unit of CVC. The reason we put forward two options is in response to industry feedback around having more control, more certainty, and less variability. And so we've got sort of a fork in the road of there will be additional inclusions. Those inclusions can be even larger in the event that the access charge rises. And this is in effect a rebalancing back to your earlier line of inquiry around moving more toward a flat rate, less variability. And so we want to test the appetite of the industry. And we're actually incentivizing that. So while the access charge would increase, the increased inclusions more than offset that. So it should be good economics for our retail service providers. But we want to see how that comes back through the consultation process.
And Senator, we don't set retail prices, but what I would like to reinforce is that retail prices since 2013 onwards, when NBN really started to grow in its usage, has actually declined. And that's because of the competition in the sector.
So if retail providers were to increase prices on the 50 megabit per second bundle, how many households could that impact? Would it be around up to 4.3 million?
Well, if you're asking how many retail customers are on the 50, we could provide you with that specific. But again, we're talking about 65 retailers. As far as I know, they all
No, I'm
operate
asking
independently.
if retail providers were to increase prices on the 50 megabyte per second bundle, how many households could that impact? How many are on there now?
Let me get that number for you.
So several providers are saying that they might have to increase their retail prices by $5 per month. Is NBN Co concerned about this, or is your view that industry needs to raise prices to ensure the business model is on solid footing?
Well, retail prices are a matter for the retailer, Senator. What we know is that the advent of the NBN policy, generated back in 2009 and 10, has led to significant competition in the retail market, which is good for consumers.
Okay. Mr Whitcomb, you keep talking about falling unit costs, which I don't completely understand where you're coming from. So can you confirm that the average cost per user, what matters in the real world, is actually increasing in real terms?
I think what I'm speaking to is the cost per gigabit that's being consumed by our retail service providers. And we have seen that cost fall from 33 cents per gigabit to just 15 cents per gigabit over the last 5 years. And when we look at our forward projection over the 2 years that the pricing consultation would apply to, it would drop down to 10 cents. So roughly a third of what it was 5 years ago. When you compare that to other utility services, which are going up much faster than the cost of living, I think we've done a great job of driving down the costs.
Okay, so can you confirm what the average cost per user is? Is that the 15 cents per gigabit?
The average cost per user is set by the retail service provider.
Yep, so what is that average cost per user? And is it increasing in real terms?
Well, I could say, I mean, I don't have all the data here, but I could get more. But if you're talking about at the entry level, the average retail price per user has fallen from $66 to $57.
No, I'm asking you what the average cost per user is, and is it increasing in real terms?
Well, that is the average cost per end user. That's the retail price
The
that
cost
they pay
per
for the service.
The cost per gigabit
Are you
is
talking-
the unit cost.
are you talking
The
the
average
whole-
cost per user is, as I understand, going up in real terms.
Are you talking wholesale price, retail price, an input into it? What
I'm
are you-
talking about the average cost per user. So Mr Whitcomb is talking about the cost per gigabit, which is the user cost. I'm talking about the average cost per user.
At a retail
The
level?
wholesale price, yes. So the
Wholesale.
wholesale price, the average cost per user is going up in real terms, is it not?
That
Yes
depends
or
on
no?
that depends on what their retailer and what speed tier mix they're on.
Yeah.
There's too many variables in that. There's
Well,
not
there's too
an
many
average
variables
cost.
in your answer too. It could depend on this or it could depend on that. It's a probability.
But I don't-
Those are
you know,
true statements, though.
I mean, the issue is people out there want to know, and we're trying to ask the questions, and you're being very evasive.
Well, the people want to know what their retail price is, right?
What's
so
the
what
wholesale
the retail price has gone
What is
from
the average
60
cost per user wholesale price? Is that going up?
Well, if you look at our average revenue per user, which is,
I'm asking about the average cost per user in wholesale terms. Is that going up in real
But
terms?
it depends upon the speed tier mix, Senator. We can't answer that question without
You
understanding
can't, or
what
you
you're
don't
asking.
want to, Mr Rue.
Oh, I'm happy to answer. Senator, I turn up to all these hearings. I'm happy to answer the
I know
question.
you
don't.
do. You turn up. The question is, it's a very simple question. Is the average cost per user going up in real terms in terms of the wholesale price?
It depends upon the speed tier mix is the answer.
The last time retail providers were this united on an issue and were effectively ignored by NBN Co, it led to an ACCC inquiry and sizable changes to service standards. Is NBN Co concerned that the ACCC could reopen considerations of pricing if it does not achieve a more balanced outcome?
we're here to support industry. That's why we have this consultation process. As a reminder, there's two parts to this consultation process. The first is essentially,
Are you concerned that the ACCC...
Senator Urquhart, please let the witness answer, and just also a heads up,
I
we've had a
would
good
like-
half hour. I'm going to go
I'm
to
happy
Senator
f-
Van in a couple of
Yeah,
minutes.
I'm happy for the witness to answer, but I don't need a long preamble about a number of things that I'm aware of. I would appreciate an answer to the question that I've asked. It's
we
a very
recognize the
simple question.
ACCC as an important stakeholder.
Are you concerned that they could reopen considerations of pricing if you don't achieve a more balanced outcome?
We recognize they're an important stakeholder, as are the retailers, and we're looking to advance the discussions through the consultation process.
So according to the ACCC Market Indicators report, NBN Co has a take-up rate of 72% in the fibre to the node footprint, and I note this is FTTN only, so we're not blending in fibre to the basement. The fibre to the premises take-up rate appears to be between 78 and 81% in the brownfield footprint. Are these figures consistent with your understanding?
I'd have to check specifically, but they don't sound far off.
Okay.
Senator Ecker, I'm going to throw to
Yeah,
Senator
sure.
Van
I'll
for a
finish that section and
questions now.
we've got some for Mr.
Senator
Knox.
Van, you have the call.
And the reason for that is the different demographics in the various areas, Senator, and there are reasons for that which we can go into if you wish. But they sound about right, but
Senator Van.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Mr. Roux and Dr. Swakowski. Nice for you to join us. Nice to meet you. I've got some questions about the business fibre zones, if that assists. Under the $4.5 billion network investment plan set out in your, I think it was the 2021 corporate plan, I understand that NBN will roll out 240 business fibre zones across Australia.
yep, that's correct, Senator.
Can you outline NBN's enterprise Ethernet service which will be available in these fibre zones?
Yeah, sure. Brad, do you want to do it too?
Yeah, so business fibre zones, we're quite pleased about this because it enables us to offer to retail service providers $0 direct fibre build, which is quite valuable, and it also rezones so that customers that are in regional areas.
I should say, and or add at that point, as a small businessman before coming into Parliament, I wish these things had been available then. So I think they're a great move for business.
Yeah, what one of the elements of it that works, and I thank you for that, is looking at rezoning so you can get that same metro price even if you're in a regional area. Working quite closely with our retail service providers on this, we have seen a significant uptick in orders since we launched this in September of 2020. I think that the customer experience on this has been quite good, and the appetite from retailers has been quite strong. So we're quite encouraged by it. It does give us an opportunity to better support regional Australia and in particular businesses out there. The other thing I'll note that when you think about an enterprise Ethernet service, you might think because of the name enterprise, we're talking about the very large end of town governments and large enterprises, but actually we're finding that a significant portion of the uptake has come from businesses that have 20 or fewer employees, and even some as few as 5 employees. So it's a great
my
SMB
next question
offering.
was going to be, what kind of benefits does this have for small and medium business? So it
Yeah,
might
so
naturally flow.
It enables world-class speed and performance for businesses all the way down to around that 5-seat and up, and really opens that up into regional Australia, an area that's typically been underserved, or if it has been served, the price has been so high that smaller businesses have not been able to access it.
Thank you. And what benefit do smaller businesses who don't need gigabit speeds or those who don't want the enterprise Ethernet service get out of having these business fibre zones?
So a couple of things. One, by having fibre closer into the customer, it enables us then to offer, as an example, an FTTP, a fibre to the prem solution in those areas more cost effectively. But again, as we've seen retail competition come in on enterprise Ethernet, and we do offer a range of speeds within enterprise Ethernet, and therefore a range of price points that get to retailers and ultimately to end customers, we're driving down that cost. So even smaller businesses now can afford that world-class service, and they compete globally and nationally where they couldn't before.
But what about those users who don't need or want those faster speeds? Will they be bearing the cost for others that are taking that up?
Absolutely not. So we've been able to drive down our fibre build cost, and therefore we're able to recover the cost specifically from that customer that's chosen to go with an enterprise Ethernet solution. So this is in no way spread. This is a zone by zone business case that we've been able to run, and the great work that our engineering team has done has been able to drive that cost down, and which is why we're able to offer this metro pricing out into regions.
Excellent. And what benefits will the residential network upgrades announced under that investment initiative bring to households?
Yep, so we are, as Mr. Roux said, what we're primarily looking at this is offering a service rather than a technology. So if there's a customer in one of those areas who wishes to order a higher speed tier and their current network can't support it, then we will go in there and we will upgrade that area and we'll build that lead in for them to be able to give them the speed and the service that they're looking for. So it's really matching what the customer needs with the capability of the network rather than go the other way around.
Thank you. That's all I have for the moment, Chair, but I'll have more later.
Sure. Senator Green.
Thank you. I put some of these questions to the department the other day, so I wanted to ask you about the information we received in a question on notice about the corporate bonuses paid out by NBN between July 2020 and December 2020. Oh, so just a 6-month period. I wanted to ask you, Chair, why isn't that information in the NBN annual report?
Senator Green, thank you for the question. A point of clarification, bonuses and short-term incentives are normally paid to employees that are part of the program in August of the year, so it doesn't cover a 6-month period, it covers a 12-month period. So the reference to these bonuses occurring between July and January, I think, misrepresent what actually happens. In terms of disclosure, I think NBN has quite a complete remuneration report. I'm the chair of the Remuneration Committee, so I have some interest in making that point. But I have been for a long time, and on other remuneration committees outside of NBN. It is, I think, a pretty fulsome disclosure. If we haven't explicitly added up the bonus amounts for executives, and that is of interest to people, then we can certainly make that available, and we will make that revision in next year's remuneration report.
Okay, because the information that we received was we had to put a question on notice through the Senate, and then the answer to that question was about 50 days overdue. So it would be easier in future if the information was publicly available. We wouldn't have to go through that process. The other information we were able to get from that question on notice was a breakdown of who was paid those bonuses, but we still need a bit more information on that. The question on notice, the answer that we got suggests that executives only received $4 million in bonuses. But how did you define executive in that question on notice? So who does the $4 million refer to? Is it just the top 8 executives in the company?
Look, I don't recall the text of the response, but I would
there should
interpret
be someone in behind you that might have put that response together who can get you that information.
I think I can satisfy your question by saying that would normally include the CEO and his direct reports.
2 people.
No. A total of approximately 10.
Yeah.
10 people made up the $4 million of bonuses to executives.
The average across that community is just under $400,000 per head.
Per bonus?
Per person.
Per
Of the
person. Wow. Okay. And then there's 200. There's about 200 executives in NBN that have salaries over $300,000. They're sort of the next tier of executive. Do you know how much of the $78 million of bonuses they received?
The number is available. I do not know that, so I'll take that on notice.
Okay. We'll seek a breakdown of the rest of the bonuses on notice as well. We'll send that through just so we can move through these quickly. Dr. Zawowski, prior to the 1st of July 2020, did the government have any discussions with you, either verbally or via correspondence, about the management of bonuses in light of the COVID recession?
I can't confirm the date, but certainly there were conversations with both shareholder, or communications with and from both shareholder ministers that referenced COVID, yes.
What did they say?
They drew our attention to the circumstances of the nation's economy and advice that we need to be prudent in the disposition of these short-term incentives.
Okay, and did you, do you know, you can't recall when that, roughly when that conversation was?
It would have been before we drafted the remuneration report and included the amounts that were proposed. That would have been at or before mid-July.
Okay, so they spoke to you before you put together the bonus report?
Well, normal practice, Senator, is that I would call the Communications Minister and broadly outline where the Remuneration Committee was landing in terms of incentives and bonuses and at-risk pay.
Okay. There was a separate organisation, but same Senate committee. Last year, the CEO of Australia Post, there was some issues raised around bonuses paid in the form of Cartier watches. And when that happened, the Prime Minister made some pretty direct statements in the question time about whether those bonuses were appropriate. And as I understand, that led the Minister for Communication to reiterate some of the things that he had said about bonuses before. Did the Prime Minister or the Minister for Communications speak to you after the Australia Post Cartier watches were revealed?
The Minister, certainly there would have been a communication after that.
After that. And what was that communication?
Drawing attention to the issue of not only bonuses but processes and disciplines associated with any form of remuneration other than the published tables,
Okay. And
which incidentally NBN does not have really.
yeah. And that conversation happened after you prepared the remuneration report?
I think the Australia Post issues were later than our Remuneration Committee and Board approved bonuses.
Okay. But so if I've got this right, so the Minister did speak to you about the management of bonuses in the light of COVID-19 before you prepared the remuneration report?
No, the process was that the remuneration report, the remuneration decisions were made, the report drafted, and I communicated with the Minister about the general direction that we were following.
It was a draft of the report and you had a conversation with the Minister, and you still went on to pay $78 million in bonuses during the COVID recession.
Yep, yes.
So was that in line with the conversations that you had with the ministers, with the Minister?
Well, the way...
Do you think that reflected what he was trying to put to you?
The process at NBN has been for many years that we follow a particular remuneration structure, and once the Remuneration Committee and Board have approved the allocation of short-term incentives, I inform the Minister, which is what I did.
I appreciate there's a usual process, but this was the COVID-19 recession, and that's what led the Minister to actually make a particular comment to you about the appropriateness of bonuses in light of the COVID recession. So you didn't change the way you were going to approach that?
Oh, we took his comments on notice and explained, although the conversation was a relatively broad one at that time, but we have a running conversation about issues of broad interest to NBN. And the view that NBN took through the committee and the board was the public interest was best served by our building and managing a first-rate network, having consumers confident in its performance, making sure that the network was resilient, and ensuring that it was affordable even as people began to work from home and homeschooling kicked in. That was what drove us.
That is absolutely something that NBN should have been doing. Like as a government, I don't know what the correct terminology, but a government owned corporation. Yeah, enterprise. That's absolutely the work of NBN. You know, that's what you should have been doing during the COVID-19 crisis. But I don't understand how that is connected to paying $78 million of bonuses.
Well, the argument would be this. Firstly, it is the management, the building, etc. of the network is what NBN is about. But building a network that then is tested as the COVID environment did in terms of the stresses on the network and the dependence that the community quickly developed on having reliable access to a ubiquitous network was unusual. In many ways, it was a kind of a real-time stress test of a network just as it was the build was completed. That was an extraordinary outcome, and to this day is an extraordinary situation where the NBN facilities and network has continued to deliver to expectations. So that's point one. Point two is we drafted a remuneration framework 7 years ago that had, as part of the remuneration for NBN employees, a base rate and then an at-risk component, which varied depending on performance.
Okay.
And that model has persisted to this day. It's a very normal model. It produces plausible outcomes. And I certainly took the view that given the performance of NBN, given the criticality of its contribution during COVID, given the contracts we have with our employees, that would lead to the bonuses that we eventually paid.
In the middle of the COVID recession. Okay, so can I just check then, in terms of what the government spoke to you about, what ministers of the government spoke to you about, prior to any media reporting of the quantum of the bonuses, did the government or the department ask the NBN for information about what the amount would be that you were paying out? Is there a process where you do let the government know how much those bonuses will be? I mean, we found out through a question and notice, but
normally the information I share with the minister ahead of time is to indicate really the percentage that reflects the calculation of the bonus, and that's what I did. We tend not to get involved in calculations of absolute amounts in discussions with the minister. The minister, all communications ministers have to date respected the fact that the decisions around remuneration and bonuses are decisions for the board.
Okay. So I'm less interested in what normally happens, but I'm interested in what happened on this occasion, because it's a different situation. We're talking about COVID-19, we're talking about a recession, we're talking about public perception of spending money when a lot of people are losing their jobs in other industries. So I'm just curious as to what happened in this instance. Did the government seek to find out what the quantum of bonuses were before the question on notice was provided to the Senate?
And I don't know. What date was that?
Well, it was 50 days late, but it was due last year. I can find out for you.
Well, Senator, while you're looking that up, the public interest, in my view, was always that the network be built, available, reliable, resilient, and could be counted upon. I don't think it's appropriate to say, well, that doesn't matter. We're in a COVID environment, and therefore everybody should have some modification to their bonuses. Some people may take that view. I did not.
All right. Can you just, in terms of what Minister Fletcher did when he learned of the $78 million in bonuses, when that information was made public through the Senate question on notice, what did he do? Did he contact you about that?
I didn't get a call about $78 million, no.
No, he didn't pick up the phone?
Not specifically on that. We have...
we had a conversation both last year about managing bonuses. Now I found out that $78 million in bonuses was paid. The minister didn't pick up the phone to ask you what happened, what the justification was.
Well, in briefing him, I would explain the context. And incidentally, the
of course.
remuneration report is a more detailed narrative from me than I've given in previous years to help address potential questions around COVID. So,
Yeah, so you knew there would be some questions about this.
Well, for the remuneration report, it seemed like an obvious thing to address anyway, given that the report would be available in August or thereabouts. But I think the other bit of context here, Senator Green, would be that conversations with communications ministers have happened every year around about this time. The quantum itself doesn't vary. I mean, it fluctuates a bit year to year, but doesn't vary too much. So the numbers around these short-term incentives and at-risk pay are of themselves presumed to be known.
I've just got one last question because I heard that time expire. There were some media reports. Well, it wasn't leaked information. The minister went out and told the media that he did contact NBN, or that his office communicated with NBN after the $78 million number was released, suggesting that he wanted to see constraints on salary increases and bonuses, and that executives had been asked to inform the government of their plans for bonuses and other at-risk remuneration of employees. How was that informed? How did that conversation take place between either the office or the minister himself? Who did that conversation take place with? And why, if the government had said to you that they needed to know when bonuses were being paid, didn't you tell them?
Well, I think I heard you say the media report came out after the $78 million figure had been published. So
yes.
at that point, the whole framework of the calculation is published.
Yep.
In other words, what the base pay is, what the incentive percentage is, what the absolute amount is. But so there isn't necessarily a need for further conversation if the data are already out there.
Well, if you've already paid the bonuses, yeah.
Well, if in fact
really take
we've
them
given
back,
effect to the remuneration structure at NBN as we do in the normal course of events.
Yeah. So how was that? This is the first part of my question was, my office has communicated with NBN this morning just to remind them of that.
Right.
What is that? Was that an email, a letter, a conversation? What was that? How did you receive that reminder?
I think that would have been perhaps a call, perhaps an email.
Please don't speculate, sir. We really need to know.
Truthfully, my interest is in managing the process. I tend not to keep a track of every conversation that I might be having around NBN with various important stakeholders.
Senator Green, I think I can take that one on notice and find out the communication.
Yeah, I think we did put it to the department previously. I think you might need to take that on notice to get back to the committee, because I've put that question to you. I want to know if it was a letter, an email or a phone call, and who made that contact.
Take it on notice.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Senator Green. Senator Van, you have the call.
Thank you, Chair. In August last year, NBN Co said that it had around 100,000 complex premises that were yet to connect. Can you provide the committee with an update on how many of these premises are now ready to connect, and how have you been able to connect these complex premises?
Yeah, sure. I could answer that, but I think Catherine could answer much better. So we might just do a rotation, Senator, if you don't mind.
Good morning, Ms Dunn.
Hello, good morning. So since the 1st of July, we've made very solid progress on making those complex installation or premises ready to connect. We have around 25,000 yet to connect, and the majority of those will be connected by the end of June. So just to bring to life for you some of those 75,000 premises, some of those premises have been available in the media. The township of Mallacoota, which we had completed the construction work for. Unfortunately, during the bushfires, the transit link burnt down. It was almost 65 kilometres of a link there. And we made the decision to build that fibre link underground. So some of those, premises have been very difficult and challenging to build. We've absolutely built to. So of the residual 25,000 odd that we've got on the books, some of the hold-ups we've been obviously very accommodating during COVID. In Victoria particularly, a number of retirement villages, for example, asked us not to come on site to build to those villages. So we've been very collaborative and accommodating, but most of those restrictions are now being removed. So we're very pleased with the way we've progressed and worked through the complex premises. Again, we do expect the majority to be completed by the end of June this year.
Thank you, Ms Dyer. Can you update the committee on how many premises across Australia are currently ordering a service on the National Broadband Network?
Just over 8 million premises are connected to the NBN network.
Thank you. And so with more than 99% of Australian businesses and homes at least ready to connect to the network, what is NBN Co's plan to grow activations?
So again, I may have to swap with my colleague, Mr Whitcomb. That's in relation to his customer strategy. From my operational perspective, I actually connect the premises, but in terms of generating the market and the customer interest, I might hand back over to Brad.
You might almost be redundant this morning, Mr Rue.
Senator, I'm having a good day. My colleagues are answering all the questions.
You might want to take a back seat.
No. I'm going to keep the back seat. Brad in the driving seat. Right?
Yep, thank you. So really it's about ongoing improvement of our value proposition. And one of the unique parts of NBN when you compare to other ways that you could access broadband in the home is that we are able to carry such a substantial volume of traffic across our network. And that's a competitive advantage that we've got. So it's bringing that to life as more use cases come on. It's continuing to encourage customers to move up to higher speed tiers so they can take full advantage of the network that we built. We do have ongoing upgrade programs to make that available in more places. And then finally, if we look at an area where we see an opportunity to increase the take-up even more, it would probably be around so-called multi-dwelling units where we have a lot of transient people that come in and out from time to time. So how do we make it easier for them to connect to the NBN? So we're quite bullish, and we've set our own sights on how do we go from the 8 million homes and businesses up to a much larger number, starting with 9 million.
Thank you. And at the risk of playing musical chairs, this might be one for you, Mr. Rook.
Okay.
I noted in your half-year financial year 21 earnings results that they noted an acceleration in activations during 2020. Why did this occur?
Yeah, there was. I mean, Brad can chip in as well. But obviously we had a large number of premises built in the previous financial year, so you do have premises come to the end of the 18-month period. But also, I think more than that, the demand for NBN services certainly accelerated because of the experience people were having during the COVID period, the experience of needing to work from home, the experience of educating their children from home. The amount of telehealth that's been taken up in certainly the last 12 months has been substantial. In fact, I talk to many telehealth providers and they tell me that their business really has accelerated with people being more confident to do healthcare online, or whether it be mental health or physical health. So more broadly, I think the community has realised the benefits of broadband and have also understood how they need to have their Wi-Fi, their modems, their computers at a standard to also get the best benefits from broadband. So I think all of those factors, Senator, as I said in my opening statement, I think we're seeing a substantial change in community behaviours in terms of where they work, what sort of work they conduct, and how they communicate with friends and families, and indeed how they do their entertainment. And all of that has certainly seen an acceleration of uptake of the network, but also of higher speed tiers.
Thank you. And just one last one. Thank you, Chair. What does it mean when you say that the network is built and fully operational?
Yeah, so the context behind this is that the Minister for Communications needed to make a determination, or wished to make a determination in December as to whether the network was built and fully operational. What that does not mean is that there's not always work to be done. What it does mean, though, is that NBN has the processes in place internally, in IT systems, between itself and the retailer community, the ability to identify issues as and when they arise, what they do with any telecommunication business. It means that we have the processes in place to be able to resolve those issues. It means that we are a mature business that has moved beyond building a network to one that is operating a network on behalf of Australians. So the report that we did was relatively substantial to answer some questions that the Department of Communications asked us to do around, does NBN have those processes in place? And I think there were 10 particular topics that we addressed through that. And the conclusion that we came to, and the Minister obviously concurred with, was that NBN was at the level of maturity whereby it was an operational business. And therefore, any further upgrades we do, for example, any remediation we do, any new retailers we onboard, whatever it may be, we have the operational processes in place to continue to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Urquhart.
Thank you.
And sorry, just also, Dr. Switowski, I've been told by the opposition that they have no further questions for you. So I'm conscious you have a flight to catch, so we will be breaking at 10:30 anyway, but feel free to leave when you need to.
Okay, I have some questions for Mr. Knox. Okay, thank you, Mr. Knox. Can I confirm that NBN Co is spending $3.2 billion on the fibre overbuild of the copper network, and that this figure, as I understand, budgets for around 400,000 premises to have fibre leading built to their homes by financial year 2024?
We're spending in the order of that as we've laid out in the corporate plan, and that sounds about right. Those leadings.
So why is there such a significant gap in the household take-up rates between fibre and copper?
Oh, that's.
I think, if I could answer that, Senator, is that all right? I think there's a couple of things. The take-up rate depends upon when a particular area was built, and a lot of the fibre to the premise part of the network was constructed many years ago, so it's been past the 18-month disconnection date. But that's only a small part. The fibre to there are three cohorts of community which has a lower take-up rate. The people on lower socioeconomic income, renters, and older Australians. And there is a preponderance, and actually some of that is part of our consultation paper that you were talking about earlier, Senator, with the retailers.
So the gap is basically around those.
A lot of it is around.
So the three cohorts. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Can I just go back?
Yep.
So renters, older Australians, and low socioeconomic. That's
correct.
The three cohorts.
And basically there is a higher preponderance of that cohort of the community in the fibre to the node areas, and that's a large part of that is the fibre to the basement part of the fibre to the node footprint, whereby you have people in units. That tends to be more of that cohort in units.
Yeah.
Renters.
It's really a cost issue, and renters who are obviously in...
Some of it is cost, so certainly lower
Well, with low socioeconomic and possibly older
certainly
Australians.
that is why we've been consulting
Yeah.
in part of the paper that you're talking about
Yeah.
with Brad earlier. Renters is an issue of a product for that community, whereby for the retailers to provide a product that enables renters to have maybe more flexible.
So, Mr. Rue, do you have mapping data on that from researchers' tests?
I believe we do.
Are you able to provide that to us?
We can see what we have, Senator.
So you do have it, but
I'll have to check exactly what we have, but once I've done that, I can see what can be provided to the committee, certainly.
So can you tell me why does, and I'll go back to Mr Knox, why does the Minister use a $2.9 billion figure when the cost embedded in the corporate plan is $3.2 billion?
The 2.9 billion is correct. I'm not sure what the difference is between the 3.2, but it's
Well, I asked
auxiliary
you,
costs.
sorry, my first question was, I asked you to confirm that NBN Co are spending $3.2 billion on the fibre overbuild, and you said yes, that was about...
I said it's in that order, yes, yeah,
Right.
that's about correct. But the real answer is 2.9 billion.
So
For
the
you.
real answer is 2.9 billion, so it's
For
not in the figure of
lead-ins.
3.2 billion?
For lead-ins.
Sorry?
For lead-ins, for the...
Yeah, so the
LFN lead-ins.
3.2 includes the 400,000 lead-ins, but the 2.9 billion doesn't, is that correct?
I'd have to check. I don't know what the difference is between the 2.9
You
and
don't know?
3.2, but that, I can tell you the original answer to the original question was it was 2.9 billion
Yes.
for the lead-ins.
That's two.
The LFN and the lead-ins.
I'm not sure what the 3.3 is, Senator. I think that
It's 3.2, Mr Rowe.
3.2, fine.
So 3.2 includes the 400,000 lead-ins, as I think Mr Knox said.
No, what we talked about was
Well, hang on, sorry, I think that's what Mr Knox just said. So can I go back to Mr Knox and just confirm that that's $3.2 billion includes that 400,000 premises in the lead-ins that I spoke about?
We'll need to check that, Senator. We'll give you an answer.
Senator, I can give you an answer if you wish.
Sorry?
I can give you the answer.
Okay.
If you read our corporate plan on page 40 of the corporate plan 2021, you'll see that if halfway down the page it talks about the network investment plan has three components. 3.5 billion to make NBN's highest speed plans available.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I guess...
Can I please answer your question? So the 3.5 billion is made up of the 2.9 billion that you mentioned for the fibre to the premise, which is a combination, and that is up to 2023, by the way. So that's a combination
So
of...
that was 2.9 billion?
That's 2.9 billion
Is for
fibre.
200,000 lead-ins?
That's 2.9 billion for fibre to be built.
Yeah, for
in the street-
200,000 lead-ins?
In the street, plus 200,000 lead-ins, yes.
Yes. And
then
that's
the-
up to 2023? did you say?
2023.
Yep.
And then the rest of the other 600 million is HFC and FTTC.
Right, but the 3.2 billion is for 400,000 lead-ins to 2024, is that correct?
I'm not sure about that, Senator.
Mr Knox?
Oh, we'd have to check.
Well, you don't know that?
Well, to confirm that, get the right number, we'll have to check.
That would be right, Senator.
Right, thank you.
That would be correct. That's to 24. So the difference between the 2.9 and 3.2 would be years.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. So the two...
Being 10:30, we will come back to you and you can resume your questioning
Okay.
after the break.
Thank you.
But we'll suspend until 10:45, and if the committee members could just come outside for a brief private meeting, that would be good. Thank you.
Grab the card later.
Right, order. Time being 10:45, we will resume. Senator Urquhart, you have the call.
Thank you very much. Look, I want to just go back to Mr Knox. So the 400,000 premises that I talked about before, that's less than 10% of the total fibre to the node footprint, is that correct?
Sounds about right, yes.
Yep. And so for every additional 100,000 customers who want a lead-in, the cost would go up then by around 300 million or around 1,500 a lead-in, is that correct?
We're hoping for a whole lot less than that, Senator.
Right, but currently, is that about the
Yeah,
figures?
that's at the top end.
Yeah, okay. So at this stage, NBN Co is spending roughly 3.2 billion on 400,000 fibred up premises, and if more premises seek to upgrade, the cost will go up at the current cost.
And that's a good problem to have, Senator.
Sorry?
And that's a good problem to have.
Right. What, that the cost goes up?
Well, no, because you're getting people using it for higher
But
speed
yes.
and therefore higher revenues, which is the
Understand that.
return model that we have.
So if we assume, Mr Knox, that NBN Co earns an additional, say, $20 per month on each of the 400,000 users who switch from copper to fibre to the premises, is that incremental revenue actually sufficient to generate a return on the capital investment over 20 years?
Yes, it is.
And so can you talk me through the maths and assumptions of how it generates that return?
Well, it's the internal rate of return model, which is over a 10 plus years, and assuming the tiers grow in line with over the period, it generates more revenue and therefore returns on capital.
Right.
That's pretty simple.
Okay, so Mr Roux, is it possible that there are strong indications that you have a residential ARPU requirement that comfortably exceeds not 49, I think that should be $1 billion by financial year 2024, but you're not willing to concede this publicly?
No, as I said, Senator, I'm not in the business of projecting long-term, very long-term numbers, Senator, but we would expect that over time, and that's the whole reason why we proposed actually that we started to invest earlier in upgrades than was the original intent, was because we expect that the demand for higher speed tiers will grow over time, and we have an obligation to build a network that's going to meet that increased demand.
So, Mr Knox, can you tell me what the incremental revenue assumption for each fibre user is? Give me a ballpark figure.
Oh, I'd have to come back to you on that one, Senator.
No idea?
I don't have that detail with me at the moment.
You don't have what, sorry?
That detail with me at the moment.
Right. Is there anyone out there in listing land that can
We'll try and see if we
provide
can get
that?
you an answer.
Okay. Mr Roux, would NBN Co be willing to table its assumptions about how the speed tier mix is expected to evolve over the next 4 years?
Let me take that on notice, Senator.
So NBN makes annual adjustments to its CVC bundles for industry, despite consumer usage experiencing ongoing growth throughout every year. Would NBN Co be open to making those CVC adjustments at more regular intervals to provide greater certainty for industry and a better experience for consumers?
I think, Senator, you've asked us a lot of questions today around pricing, and we're in the which you're perfectly entitled to do so. We are, however, in the middle of consultation with retailers, and that may well be something that comes up in consultation with retailers. If it does, we'll respond to it as and when that occurs. But I'd like to just re-emphasise, though, that what we have, there's a couple of things in pricing we have.
Yeah, just back on that. I know I've asked a lot of questions, but you seem reluctant to answer some of them around some of the issues.
We're not
with
reluctant
retailers.
at all. It's just we're in the middle of
I mean, this is quite an easy question. Would you be open to making those adjustments at more regular intervals to provide that greater certainty for industry and a better experience for consumers? It's not locking you in. It's asking, would you be open to making those?
I think what Brad and I have been trying to say to you is that there are multiple retailers with multiple.
I understand that.
There are multiple retailers with multiple ideas.
Yep.
We have been very clear in both our consultation paper and also in comments that some of my colleagues, not me, but some of my colleagues have made publicly, that we're very open to discussing the construct of our plans.
So
we're open to ideas from retailers. Senator.
Okay.
We've asked retailers to provide ideas, and we will continue to consult with them.
So in those discussions with retailers, has that issue been raised about making those adjustments at more regular intervals? Has that been part of the discussion? And have you been open to that?
We're open to consultation with the industry, Senator. That's why we
I understand that. I'm asking about a specific point.
Brad, you can actually go to.
Just while Mr Rue's sorting out.
Sure.
No, Brad can have it permanent at the table.
Mr Rue, hang on. Does anyone in the committee have an objection to the media taking photographs? No. In that case, please proceed. Thanks, Mr Rue.
Okay, Mr Whitcomb.
Sorry, could you...
So I guess the issue is you've been having the discussions with retailers. Has part of those discussions been around making the CVC adjustments at more regular intervals, and would NBN Co be open to that if that wasn't something that was raised to provide that greater certainty for industry and a better experience for consumers?
So, absolutely open to the discussion with retailers. What they've tended to emphasize in the past, though, is to have less frequent changes and more of a roadmap of consistency that they can look out and see this is what's going to happen.
Right, but if they came to you and said we would want more CVC adjustments at more regular intervals, then you're not opposed to that?
No, not conceptually. I would point out too that within the CVC...
What does not conceptually mean?
Just exactly that. So the CVC that the retailers purchase, they do purchase it on a daily basis. So the idea of a more frequent adjustment to CVC than daily, I suppose, is something we could look at. But I think when it comes to complexity, that would be a challenge for the entire industry.
Right. So you're prepared to look at it, but at the end of the day, it's possibly going to be too difficult.
It's unlikely that that would rise to the top of what the industry is asking, but if it does and it makes sense, of course we'll entertain that. We're looking for the best possible solution for the industry.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have, but Senator Pratt has some.
So, Senator Pratt, you have the call.
Satellite. Okay.
I've got some questions now, please, about your contracting model. How many class actions are currently being pursued in the courts against your Tier 1 delivery partners for sham contracting?
We'll do another switch, I'm sorry.
That's fine, you'll probably be back later.
I'm not aware of any, Senator, but let's ask Catherine.
I'm not aware of any.
Is that because you haven't looked or because you don't think there are any?
So we obviously become aware of some of our contractors that have issues, I guess, if you like, in relation to their subcontracting arrangements, and we watch that closely. In relation to NBN's agreements with our delivery partners, we're very mindful of the contracts that we have with them. But again, it's not something that we monitor. We monitor our relationship with our contracting.
So why don't you contract your contractors?
So the rollout of the NBN and our operating network is it's very, very complex. So if you imagine NBN engaging with potentially thousands and thousands of different skill sets, different capabilities in a large geographic...
I can imagine that, but it would make, how do you know you've got your compliance right? Do you agree that NBN currently uses a pyramid contracting model to deliver its project to the Australian public? It sounds like from what you've said that you must do.
NBN has our own internal workforce. So again, approximately 10% of all the work we have our own internal field workforce that completes various activities, which allows us to flex in the activities we complete. Certainly the delivery partners that we engage with, many of those delivery partners also maintain a directly engaged workforce as well. Again,
You would hope so, otherwise I don't know why you would have multiple layers of contracting where people get a slice of the pie but someone at the end has to do the work. Can I ask, how do you describe your delivery of your workforce model? How do you categorise it? Or characterise it?
We would categorise it as a hybrid approach. So as I've said, we do have our own internal workforce, and again, we've actually increased our internal workforce in the last couple of years, and that's an area that we continue to consider as we look into the future. We've done that for a number of different reasons, diversity of skill sets in different technologies, and the partners that we engage with for the construction and the operations of the network. Again, we do work with them very closely in understanding the models that they're utilising to deliver work on behalf of NBN, but we're very mindful that the NBN is a very large network, as I said, very geographically dispersed, complex in terms of the technology, the type of skill sets we require.
Thank you. I don't nevertheless have any real sense of whether it is just a shambles of an arrangement because it's so big and diverse, or whether there are particular models you seek to use. You have said you've got no awareness of any sham contracting within your subcontractors' contractors. Can I ask, though, if you're aware of the news around telco contractor BSA being accused of sham contracting? Have you signed an agreement with BSA?
Yes, BSA have been for some time one of our delivery partners at various stages of the NBN, and I'm unaware of that.
So they're one of your contractors, but you are unaware that they have been accused of sham contracting. Now, surely, if you are the ones that have contracted them, then you need to be able to hold your contractors to account for these practices, and yet, despite the fact that this has been in the news, you don't know about it. Are you not being straight, or do you not care about issues of sham contracting within your workforce?
Our contract governance model is very strict in terms of the way we engage with our delivery partners. There's certain provisions in our contract.
How can you say you're being strict when you've just said you don't know about the involvement of this company in a class action, that they are subject to a class action?
I'm not across the specifics.
Okay, is there anyone here who is more across the specifics? And why not? This is a very critical issue. Mr. Rue?
I have similarly read the reports.
Okay, so you were aware.
Sorry.
Even though
I've read the reports.
At least someone is.
I'm not, nor can Catherine comment on them because BSA is obviously a listed company. So I don't think you're asking us to comment on BSA itself. What we do have is very clear contractual terms around the obligations of our contractors.
So are BSA in breach of their contract terms?
We have very clear obligations. The various delivery partners have very clear obligations to us in terms of how they manage their individual contracts. I don't know if you want to talk to that, Catherine.
Are they in breach of their contract terms? Have you looked?
So in terms of the contract that we have with BSA, it relates to the timely payments to their workforce, to their contractors. We also have modern slavery provisions in there. So we have a very well-defined and clear parameters in the way that we engage with BSA and our expectations of those for all sorts of things, including obviously very strict health and safety protocols. We have a good governance model in place.
Okay, so you've got a good governance model. Can I ask Mr. Rue how you have applied that good governance model to BSA, noting that they've had this allegation made against them?
Again, Senator, given that BSA is a listed company, I think we've got to be careful how much we go into this. But there is allegations made against BSA. We clearly will ensure that contractual arrangements between ourselves and any of our, in this case, delivery partners, are met. And that, so there are, when Catherine talks about governance, there is very clear meetings at all levels between ourselves and, in this case, delivery partners to ensure multiple things are done, from health and safety reporting through to payments of, for them to pay their contractors on time, etc. Okay. And we manage that at a governance level. I'm not aware of any breach of contract.
You're not aware of any breach of contract?
I'm not aware of
so you're not aware of any existence of sham contracting in this case?
I'm aware of allegations, Senator.
Have you looked, because of those allegations, specifically at these contracts? You've just said you've got robust due diligence. I would think on the basis of an allegation like this, you would at least have a look.
Let us take a notice exactly what we've done, just so that we don't mislead the Senate. But let us take that on notice, Senator, or maybe someone can actually reply.
Can I ask Ms Dyer who's responsible for that relationship?
I'm responsible for that relationship with BSA.
Okay. Yet you were unaware of these allegations, but Mr Roux, you were.
I'm aware of media reports, Senator.
Has anything been done in response to those media reports in relation to examining this contractor or any others?
Senator, I think we're talking about potential. I'm not sure that there is actually a class action launched at this stage. Can you confirm that that has actually occurred?
I will try to, but I can't imagine that these things end up in the paper without there being progress. But I would think that the intent to launch a class action should be enough for you to take a look.
Well, I think we're aware of, we're obviously aware of the matter being alleged. We at this stage, as I said, Senator, it's an allegation. It may be an allegation, but I can tell you now that BSA Limited sham contracting class action, this is a class action that is not specific to a wide range of companies. It is specific to BSA, and it is now listed with Shine Lawyers. And it says, and it's quite specific, it's quite specific, frankly, to the telecommunications industry. And it says, if you are a telecommunication technician who worked for BSA under a subcontracting arrangement, you may actually be an employee and owed statutory entitlements such as super minimum wage and annual leave. Shine Lawyers has commenced a class action against BSA alleging it misrepresented the true nature of its relationships with telecommunication technicians and denying them of their rightful employment entitlements. We believe they should be compensated. Now, you've just said to me you've got anti-slavery provisions, a whole range of provisions that uphold the obligations of contractors to be fair to their employees. So
how can both be true?
So Senator, firstly, I'm sorry, I'm reluctant to talk about, again, a listed company. So let me give you a general statement. There is an obligation of our contractors to comply with lots of things, including the appropriate payment of compensation to their contractors or their staff. That we are not aware of any breach of those contractual obligations.
How can this get to a class action stage and you be unaware of it?
No, we're not aware of any breach, Senator. There's a difference between an allegation and a breach.
Okay, but
so
if lawyers pick this up, they must have a fair idea there's a breach. Why weren't you aware that there might be allegations of breaches before Shine Lawyers were?
We are aware of what our step in to correct me, Catherine, anything I say here, but we have contractual terms with our delivery partners that require them to follow various legislative requirements around health and safety and around specifically what I think you're referring to is the appropriate payment of their contractors. And we have we've rights at any point in time if we want to go and check that that's done. But at this stage, Senator, I'm not aware of any breach.
Okay, if you want
I'm aware of allegations.
At any time you can check this. Now, you said, Mr. Rue, that you were aware of these new reports from last year. Why didn't you check?
We can direct the contractor to provide us with the statutory declaration that all subcontracts have been paid.
Okay,
Now,
which of your contractors have you asked for that information from in a stat dec form?
We are not aware of any breach, Senator, to trigger that.
Okay, when have you ever asked any of your contractors to provide a stat dec to that effect?
I don't know. Do you know?
I would have to take that on notice.
We can take that on notice.
Have you ever done it?
We do occasionally ask for information through our audit processes, and we will ask for time to time about payment activity. We'll ask for health and safety compliance. Again, like, as I said before, we do have a strict governance model in place with our delivery partners. So we do that on quite a regular basis. But in relation, I guess, to the issue that you're asking us about, we're not aware of a class action at this point in time.
Okay, Ms. Dyer, can I...
Pratt, I do have questions here. How much longer do you want in this section?
Well, it might be a little longer than I was intending given the evidence, but so I can give the call over in a moment.
Sure.
I wanted to ask Ms. Dyer, you are affirming that you are entirely unaware that there were allegations of sham contracting against BSA?
There's obviously been information in the media in relation to that, but my understanding in relation to is there a class action against BSA, my understanding is there's not yet a class action in relation to that.
Okay. Can I ask what you did in response to the allegations in the media in making inquiries to BSA about their obligations under your own contracts?
We have a strict contract management procedure through our procurement team and through our industry engagement team, and I would need to check back with them.
Okay, so can I ask specifically, once you became aware of these allegations in the media, did you take any extra action? Did you trigger anything that was outside your overall oversight, which is business as usual?
I would need to check that and come back to you.
I'd be grateful if you're able to do that this morning. Thank you.
Thanks. Senator Van.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to ask some questions about financials, so if Mr Knox might want to come up.
I want to swap.
Thank you. Can you provide the committee with an overview of the company's recent half-year earnings results? And particularly, did these meet the organisation's expectations?
Well, certainly met our expectations and then some. The revenue was up 25% on the prior corresponding period. Remember, this is for that 6-month period. We had reasonably flat operating costs. EBITDA, which is our operating cash flow, is a very, very important metric to us, went from a loss of 660 million to a positive result of 425 million.
Sorry, can you just say that one again?
So the EBITDA went from a loss in the prior corresponding period, for that 6-month prior corresponding period, a loss of 660 million to a positive 425 million.
So over $1 billion turnaround.
A $1.1 billion turnaround.
Wow.
If you exclude subscriber costs, which is more like a capital payment, but we treat it as an expense, EBITDA increased by 60% to $1.2 billion. CapEx saw a 43% reduction on the prior corresponding period, and that's clearly following the completion of the build. Naturally, you expect volumes to drop down and therefore costs to reduce. And that's sort of well in excess of our expectations. We connected 660,000 new activations. And this is why the whole COVID, at the same time COVID was still roaring away for us. So we were trying to manage an operating business, still completing the activations because we accelerated the footprint, the build of the footprint in the previous year. So we were still dealing with a lot of these. We had a relatively flat ARPU, yet we still managed to exceed all our financial and to a large extent our operating targets as well. 70% of customers are on a plan of 50 megabits per second or more. And as I said, this is why we're transforming from a build company to an operating company. So a lot of focus on the financial metrics, and the results in that 6-month period up to the end of December of 2020 really stood on their own. So.
Thank you. And is NBN on track to achieve its financial year 21 revenue target, which I think was set down as $4.5 billion outlined in the corporate plan?
Yes, well, a simple extrapolation of what we've done over that first 6-month period leads us to be quite comfortable where the corporate plan and our measuring up to those results expectations in the corporate plan.
And can you update the committee on how NBN Co was able to achieve that $1.1 billion, I think you said it was, improvement in EBITDA?
Yeah, well, a lot of that came from the additional activations. As I said, our ARPU was pretty flat, so we relied...
Could you sorry, ARPU? For the record, just ARPU.
Average revenue per user, I should say. So the revenue we're getting per user. So a lot of it was around the additional activations. So that's where a lot of the revenue came from. But at the same time, we held our costs relatively flat. We did absorb a higher subscriber cost because of those accelerated activations, and particularly coming out of the FY20 year, and that cost us a bit more in expense as well. But still, we managed to achieve a stellar result.
Thank you. And can you update the committee on any improvements in NBN Co's free cash flow, and what are the factors that might be behind this?
Well, a lot of the improvements are going to come from a rapid reduction in payments, subscriber payments to the Telstra and Optus, as we have been doing over the last 10 years or so. So that's where a lot of our cash flow growth will come from, combined with a much lower CapEx expenditure as we move forward over the next few years. So that's a lot of how we drive the cash growth, and at the same time trying to keep our operating costs coming down as well. So as we move further and further into the operating territory, we're getting more and more efficiencies out of the running of the organisation.
And can you provide an overview of the company's debt-raising history, and in particular if you'd address things such as why are you raising debt, how much you have raised, and what the next steps in your debt raising are?
So it's always been part of the capital structure and the future of the capital structure. It's the way NBN was set up. It was the $29.5 billion of capital from the government, and $19.5 billion worth of debt was also contributed. They were both fully drawn down by June of last year, and the agreed refinancing of the $19.5 billion is that it matures in June of 2024. So we have an enormous task to now repay that loan over the next 3 years. We've commenced that process at the halfway through of the calendar year of last year, and we raised $10 billion both in the bank, partly made up in the bank market, and we also did our inaugural bond issue in the Australian market, and that we raised $10 billion out of that. So that sort of gave us the foundation now to move into the capital markets, the bigger capital markets. These will be foreign capital markets, because that's the pool, the deepest pool where we can sequentially keep going back and raising those funds all the way through for the next 2 or 3 years, so that we can fulfil our obligations to repay the government loan. We're in a fortunate position that we are a national infrastructure, and therefore our risk rating is relatively low. And we need to make sure it stays that way, which means we have various credit metrics that we aim for. And it's also as part of the GBE guidelines that it's requiring us to, over the longer term, focus on achieving a standalone investment grade. And if you work backwards from there, that means we need to, if we're generating a certain amount of cash, then we can have certain amounts of debt. and that puts us in the investment grade if we achieve those targets. So that's how we're focusing now on the capital structure of NBN, and each time we go back to the markets, we will be able to demonstrate that we can show a clear path to meeting those credit metrics. So we're now becoming a very sophisticated borrower, and we're dealing with sophisticated markets and investors, and therefore how we act, how we report, and statements we make are very, very important. So we need to focus on making, or not making, the case may be, future forward statements which could be misconstrued. And whilst there may be some legal implications for that, the biggest issue is it could change the nature of the pricing of those bonds. So when we go back out to the markets, they'll say, well, you're a high risk now because certain statements have been made, possibly, this is a scenario, and therefore we will expect a higher return for that risk. So it's very important that we manage this process just like any other major commercial organisation. It's how they do it. There are conventions that we need to follow and in order to achieve the optimum result for the taxpayers of Australia. So it's a very sophisticated approach. It's very high in documentation, requires a lot of validation by management and our board, and these are legal obligations. We can't be making statements in this documentation that aren't correct, but they're all historical information that we put in the marketplace, and because they're sophisticated investors, they can quickly come to the conclusion what is the future for NBN. They just need to understand the regulatory environment. I will remind you that we're not known really to the foreign markets. They're probably aware of NBN, but outside of that, they're going to rely on information that we give them, historical information that we give them. The results from our 6 months performance will be very important. They need to see a rapid deleveraging opportunity, which is what it does demonstrate, and the growth in revenues. So we're well set up for it. The markets are set up for it, albeit they change by the day. So it is as I said at the beginning, a mammoth task, and it's setting precedents for government and for the departments, and they need to be able to figure out how they get their heads around and give us approval to proceed, and that's ongoing at this stage.
You talked about risk. Does unwarranted criticism increase that risk for NBN and its borrowing processes?
Bits and pieces by themselves, it's not all that material, if that is the case. It's where things become material, like if there's a change in strategy, if there's if there's talk of privatisation, those sorts of things. We need to keep the markets informed as to what's going on. So it's careful about the sort of statements we do need to. Well, we do need to be careful about what sort of statements are made, both in the public arena and privately as well. So.
And just lastly, what interest rates are you able to borrow at in international markets? Excuse me. And how does this compare to local markets?
Well, the international markets are yet to be tested. And we, as I said, we're using the Australian market as a foundation, and we did achieve some excellent results out of that. Now, our timing was good, and the volume was fit for this market as well. So we have a good, solid foundation to point to when we're talking to foreign investors, and we'll use that along with our public statements that we made and our results, and they will take advice from analysts as well as to how we're expected to perform. So it's as I said, the markets are looking pretty good at the moment, but they do change based on stimulus out there. It's about supply and demand. There is a lot of supply out there at the moment. In other words, a lot of commercial operations looking to borrow money because it is a very cheap price at this stage, but that then in turn pushes up the interest rates. So we need to pick our timing, make sure we've got some clear market space.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Senator Pratt.
Thank you. What percentage of works undertaken on NBN assets or on behalf of NBN are undertaken by contractors, please?
We'll switch chairs again. Hi. So what percentage of works are undertaken by contractors?
Yeah, I don't, in terms of the actual split, so from a build perspective, the majority of the initial build was completed by contractors. In relation now that the network is fully built, the operations of the network, approximately 90%, and this is approximate because we do...
Yeah. No, I do understand that. You don't need to clarify any further than that, because I think I can understand why you can't be more specific. How do you ensure delivery partners only engage qualified technicians?
We, again, under the terms of the contracts that we have with our delivery partners, we have explicit standards and compliance activities.
Okay, so how does your compliance activity work? Can you outline the compliance mechanisms in place?
Again, we have our audit and risk protocols that we manage as part of our overall compliance of contracts.
Okay, so what does that mean on the ground in terms of talking to the employees of subcontractors or double checking their work?
Okay. We have a quality assurance and quality inspection program in place. So again, that is actually performed by NBN staff. So as part of the, I guess, the underlying mechanics of the contracts that we have in place, our delivery partners have access to an extranet, for want of a better word, which essentially gives them all of their work instructions, outlines all of the technical capabilities, what we actually need from them, the quality that we actually expect. So backed up with that, our own field workforce perform quality inspections across our subcontracting work.
How do you... So that doesn't get to the checking the qualifications of employees of those subcontractors? When and how do you do that?
That is absolutely a requirement for our contractor to make sure that they have that all in place and all in order.
How do you double check that?
We conduct audits of that process, and that's how we engage with our contractors.
Have you found many instances where that they have employed technicians without the relevant qualifications?
Where gaps are identified, delivery partners get a copy of the audit report from NBN with remedial actions. From time to time, we do pick up issues with our delivery partners, but there's nothing systemic that would come to light for me.
Okay. Can I ask how you... so that's audits of the process or audits of the technicians. Which do you do?
We do both. We do audits, well, we do multiple things. We do audits of the contracts themselves, both in terms of what the delivery partners are doing, what they're claiming for. We will do in-field inspections to make sure that we are paying them correctly for work that's been performed. And we also will do audits on the quality and also health and safety. I personally do health and safety inspections twice a quarter myself as well.
Okay. Can I ask if you're aware of any requirement imposed on subcontractors by either primes or delivery partners that they shall only purchase materials required for the undertaking of works through them?
I'm unaware of that, no. That wouldn't be something that NBN would instruct a delivery partner to do.
But would it be improper to do that? It would undermine the subcontracting nature of the relationship if the primes were doing that.
I would be speculating in relation to the nature of one of our delivery partners and their relationship with the subcontractor.
Okay, so you haven't looked at that or sought to have an interest in it?
Our agreement is with our delivery partners, and again, how we engage with them and how we make sure that we've got a good operating environment in place. And as I said before, we have a very strict governance and compliance framework in place that we've been working
Well,
at.
I can't see how it can be strict if you're not monitoring down. You've said that in terms of the primes, but if you're not drilling down any further...
But Senator, surely it's the obligation of the delivery partner to comply with all legislation, laws, employment law, health and safety, etc. And they and our contracts with them require them to do that.
Can I ask if you can please take on notice, or if you've got any information now about the number of PTY Limited contractor firms engaged at present as at 30th of June in each of the preceding years and over the life of the NBN build?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
That's right. You can take it on notice. We're looking for the number of contractors that you've had engaged.
That we directly engage with?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so we can do that.
Okay. And I can put the wording on notice if you like.
Yeah, no, certainly. Yep.
Is NBN aware, and if so, how does it condone, that contractors could perform work for hours without any payment due to having to incomplete the ticket of work due to factors outside their control?
Senator, as I said, it is incumbent upon all our contractors, incumbent upon NBN as well, obviously, but it's incumbent upon all our contractors to comply with all legislative requirements, including employment law.
Okay. How do you manage, if it's incumbent on you also to make sure that...
It's incumbent upon us for the people we employ.
Yes. How do you... you must have had allegations, had to respond to these issues in the past. Are you... because BSA can't be the only example that you are aware of, can I ask if NBN Co has the power to access the contracts between primes and their subcontractors? I know that's the case in construction.
We can seek, we can ask our contractor questions and seek clarification from our contractors, but we don't. And obviously there's obligations within NBN's contracts on, our expectations of our delivery partners. So we will seek questions from our delivery partners if we've got a specific area of concern. That would be the mechanism that we would use.
But again, Senator, it is the delivery partner's obligation to comply with the law.
Can you request a copy of their agreements? How do you know that these agreements aren't sham agreements? They are becoming borderline sham. What have you done to address that?
By requiring our delivery partners in their contractual arrangements to comply with the law.
Okay. Do you request a copy of their agreements? How do you know if their agreements are compliant with the law? It's in your contract with them that they're compliant, but what if their contracts with others are not compliant and they've breached, in effect, their contract with you?
Do you want to talk about the government?
How would you know?
Pardon?
The government's arrangements.
It sounds like you've got contractors in breach of their contracts with NBN Co if they are engaging in these practices.
We take our governance of our delivery partners very seriously, and as we look to allocate more work, and we do this in a very robust manner, we take all, everything that you've spoken about, the way the qualitative measures, the way they respond to health and safety, the way they manage their own workforce, etc. We take that into consideration.
I know, but you're not... Thank you, and I could acknowledge that. However, you're not really getting to the core of the accountability mechanisms here. You've talked about your processes, but you've not given me any examples of how you exercise this accountability with your contractors. So can I ask if you're aware of your delivery partners devolving new layers of subcontractors, so subcontractors delivering to subcontractors to give themselves a liability shield?
Senator, we need to be very careful to comment upon legal matters that may end up litigation.
I'm not asking you to comment on legal matters
you
of litigation.
You
I'm asking you if you're aware of that level of devolution in your own contracts. Are you concerned now about your own liability?
No,
Is
not
that
at
why
all.
you won't talk about
Not
it?
at all. What we've got to be very careful that if there are potential class actions going to be launched, that any comments made cannot impact upon any litigation that may occur. That's the only point I'm making, Senator. I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Okay.
But if If allegations are proven to be true, that's a very different situation, but we're not aware of situations where our contract has been broken whereby a delivery partner is not complying with legislation.
Okay, it doesn't sound like you're looking very hard, though, at...
We have extremely strong governance processes with our delivery partners, Senator.
You have the governance processes with your delivery partners, but that
Yes.
doesn't sound like you are double-checking their subcontracts with their own
They have an
delivery
obligation,
partners.
I repeat, they have an obligation under their contract with us to comply with all legislative requirements, including employment law.
It sounds like, though, you're taking their compliance at face value rather than double-checking
It
it.
is their obligation to do that.
Have you double-checked you don't end up with your own liability?
We have. Do you want to talk about the audit again?
Yeah, and actually, Senator, if it's okay, I will just touch back on your question for BSA. So in relation, your specific question to me was, what additional things have we done since the BSA issue was raised in, I think, February and March 2019. So obviously we're aware of that from a media perspective, and we're not aware that there is a class action that is yet in place in relation to that. So I then go to the second part of my question is, we are very confident in our governance and audit process that we have in place with our delivery partners, that they are complying with the nature of the contracts that we have with them.
Okay, does that in effect mean that you don't think there's any validity to a class action? You think your company that you sub BSA is entirely compliant?
From an NBN and BSA perspective, the contract and the performance of the contractor that BSA have with us, they are compliant with our contract.
They might be compliant in the outcomes, but how do you know they're compliant in how they've paid their staff and upheld
Senator,
their own
it's not-
occupational health and safety?
Well, occupational health and safety we can talk to. It's not for us to comment upon an action, though, a potential action that's currently an allegation, Senator, but health and safety?
Can I ask, please, for copies of your audit procedures and specifically any processes you've got in writing that deal with alleged underpayment? And if you can please take on notice whether you can provide any correspondence, file notes and communications with the company, and file notes and correspondence in relation to that.
We'll take that on notice, Senator, certainly.
And can I just offer, Senator, because I am definitely picking up a specific area of interest, I would be more than happy to come and brief you on all of our governance procedures, our audit procedures, because again, it's something that I've worked very tirelessly on for 10 years now, and I'm confident in the way that we've established that.
Well, we'll see. I guess the Shine lawyers are recruiting participants for a class action, so we'll see if the experiences of workers employed by BSA matches up with your purported confidence in them.
Senator Pratt, I do have more questions from Senator Van when you are ready to perhaps take a break between brackets.
Can I ask in relation to redundancies within the field workforce directly or indirectly by NBN? There seems to be quite a substantial number.
Sure. So with the completion of the initial build, this was very well known in relation to we had a very large project, we were at scale for a long time. So again, that was something that we were very transparent about at the 30th of June last year, that literally our construction volumes would drop off quite rapidly. But, sorry, Senator, but in relation to your specific question about field staff, I would say, by large, the majority of field staff have transferred into operations. Now, some of those staff didn't have all of the skill sets required to go from a construction type activity to an operations activity, but we had very open and transparent conversations with our staff in relation to that. And some people had joined for a project. They joined to construct the NBN, and they did want to move on.
Okay, so can I ask if you've got a quantity of those redundancies and how you report them? You can take that on notice if you need to, but I'm interested in your data around the redundancies.
In the field force, Senator?
I beg your pardon?
In the field force?
Yes, in the field workforce.
Yes, we can take that on notice.
Engaged directly or indirectly by NBN.
Sure.
Are you aware, please, of the number of skilled migration visa holders engaged directly or indirectly by NBN or its field workforce?
Across the whole company or again in the field force?
Both. Well, across the field force.
Skill migration across the field force. We'll have to take that on notice, Senator.
Yep.
It wouldn't be large, but if at all. But
Okay,
let
I
us
guess
take-
I really want to be able to see, you don't think it's large. I guess I'm interested to see that you need to be tested on when workers are made redundant with the same companies seeking skilled migrants to perform that.
I see.
Same work for less money.
I see.
As I understand it, workers are being pressured currently to sign contracts with NBN delivery partners and subprime contractors with no corresponding schedule of rates, which is essentially a blank contract giving them no minimum rate or minimum conditions. Why is that the case, and are you aware of this?
This is outside of NBN?
NBN's subprime contractors
Are signing NBN staff or XM?
Well,
Sorry,
it shouldn't matter whether they're
Sorry,
NBN
I'm trying to understand
staff.
your question. What's your
It
question?
will be within your subcontractors of your own contractors, subprime contractors.
Yeah. Doing what, sorry?
They are asking people to sign contracts. They're pressuring them to do so, and the contracts don't have a schedule of rates, pay rates or work rates in the contract.
I'm not sure I understand.
So I think the Senator's saying, so our delivery partners are taking on subcontractors and by the sounds, if I'm understanding your question correctly, are almost forcing them onto questionable contracts with which I would refer back to Mr. Rue's answer before, which is, our expectation obviously is that our delivery partners comply with employment law and the laws of the land, and that would be our expectation. So in relation to your specific question, are we aware of that? No, we're not.
No.
You're not aware. I might ask you if you might look into it. What provisions are in place for subcontractors and workers to report malfeasance or corruption in the allocation of work?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of the question?
What provisions do you have in place for subcontractors and workers to report malfeasance or corruption in the allocation of work?
So I can only talk about NBN processes, and we have, again, a very strict governance model and delegations of authority through the company in how we select the allocation of work to our partners. Again, that has complete company sign-off and occasionally board sign-off as well.
Okay, so can I ask in that context, where is the provision of a worker who's subcontracted to a subcontractor to access those processes?
So again, our award of the work is to the prime contractor or
So
to...
there's, okay, essentially you're saying there is no provision in place for a worker of a subcontractor to report malfeasance or corruption in the allocation of work.
Well, essentially our contract and our expectation, which again, which we audit and there's a strong compliance to, is the expectation is our contractor is obviously acting legally and in accordance with employment law.
Okay, so why do you think people are being forced to sign contracts where workers don't know what they will be paid?
I'm unaware of that. I'm sorry, Senator. We are unaware of that.
Thanks, Senator Pratt. I'll come back to you, but I'm going to go to Senator Van for a short bracket.
Thank you kindly, Chair. Mr Rue, can you tell us how prepared NBN Co was for the floods in New South Wales and parts of Queensland that we've seen over the last week or so?
Yeah, we'd love to. Catherine, do you want to talk to that?
Yes, sure. So off the back of the bushfire recovery program that occurred, NBN, like many other telecommunications companies and indeed other utilities, took key learnings out of that. And some of the key learnings that we've now got in action and that we are using to help with the New South Wales floods and the flooding on the border of Queensland is we have 15 muster trucks. So these trucks essentially provide via satellite connectivity.
In Sky Muster.
Yeah, they're able to be deployed on demand, if you like, to these areas. The second solution that we have, which emergency services can request, is we have what we call 22 fly-in type installations. So, for example, if you can't get a muster truck somewhere because it's flooded, but you need to get to a community centre or a stranded community, these satellite units can be flown in. And what they do is they provide Wi-Fi, to a community that may be in a community centre not able to connect to broadband. The third key activity that we've done is we also have enabled now 102 out of 109, evacuation centres. So these have permanent satellite connections onto them. They're central points where communities can go to. So in relation to those other activities, we've also been deploying generators to power up the network, and we're now from a recovery point of view, because everyone's now talking about moving into recovery, we are looking to bring in more workforce into these areas to make sure that we can recover from anyone that has had an impacted service. We are seeing, though, over the last week, we're recovering quite rapidly, which has been very pleasing. And currently, we according to the figures that I looked at this morning, we have about 2,000 customers that are having a service impacting event because of the floods. So again, performing very well, and we now have great infrastructure in place to be able to really step in and help emergency services.
Thank you. I think you said 2,000 had lost access. So was that the total impact?
No, that's the current state of play as of this morning. So over sort of, the past week or so.
I'll just rephrase it another way. How did the network stand up in the flood affected areas, and how many end users lost access to the network?
Yeah, so over the period, I guess, of the flooding, services have gone down. We've been able to bring them back up with, things like temporary generators or batteries. And where it's been safe, we have deployed field workforce. So we have had tens of thousands of customers that have been impacted. But again, what has been really pleasing to see is we've been able to bring those customers, quickly back to enjoy their service. So we don't have this big bank up of tens of thousands of customers waiting to be reconnected to the NBN. So I give you sort of like the figure there of about 2,000, but we've had, some that have been fixed and some that have, had assurance problems, but we've performed very well.
Wonderful, and congratulations on that. And how does NBN Co respond to these types of disaster situations? For example, do you prepare for them once you see a weather forecast and act then, or is it more that you react once the scale of the disaster is clear? Yeah,
no, we definitely prepare, and again, even obviously managing the field workforce for the organisation, I'm across a lot of the other activities that we are going in relation to be able to move staff around to be able to help with the recovery efforts. The other sort of three items I touched on before, they're obviously in preparation, unfortunately, for a natural disaster. So we have that already in play, and then it's really up for us to deploy it.
So they're rapid deployable.
Rapidly and on demand, and and they're great solutions because they're very transportable, and we can provide Wi-Fi, but to people that unfortunately may not be able to get back to their homes for a period of time, and it is a way for them to be able to stay connected to their loved ones.
Terrific, thank you. And what other natural disasters do you have to prepare for, and how do you go about that?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have lots of natural disasters in Australia. So
Welcome to Australia.
Yeah, I know. We had obviously recently, the horrific fires. We have flooding. We have lots of different weather events. Sometimes we can have extreme cold, etc. So again, it's like you said, it is the nature of living in Australia and being able to really have solutions to be able to get communities back up and running, and the flexibility to be able to move workforce around when needed.
Thank you, Ms. Dyer. And that was my last question, Chair, but I will take you up on that offer about a briefing on your governance arrangements even if Senator Pratt doesn't.
Would be my pleasure. Thank you.
Senator Pratt, you have the call.
Mr Rue, I understand from advice given to me that frontline telecommunications technicians have been forced to replace fibre to the curb modems and receive no payment in return. To put this in more concrete terms, technicians are saying they are not paid for these jobs, but if they don't accept copying these unpaid jobs, then they're not given other jobs. Are you aware of this?
I'm not, Senator, and I'd like you to pass that on to me, please, if you could. If you've got specific examples, I'd be very happy to take that, please.
Well, it's hard, as you would well understand, it can be hard to get specific examples because the reason people cop doing these unpaid jobs is because they're desperate to get the other work. So we can work with you to try and unpick this, but I would think you would be as actively as NBN Co, given the problems we've been outlining today, jumping on them straight away.
Well, can you be more specific, Senator, about what you've heard, please?
Well, I can try to be, but I've certainly seen this kind of feedback come in from unions, but of course unions don't get it firsthand from their members. They have to, people are desperate, they want this work, so they don't disclose what they're being asked to do. So you might be more effective in getting to the bottom of this by asking your subcontractors, your prime contractors, right down the line about what their arrangements are and if this is happening.
I wonder though, could you what you've got and what understanding what you've just told me, what you're comfortable sending us, I'd appreciate it though, Senator, if you could. We have we've got people in our government team who'd be very happy to get the information from you as much as you can. Obviously, I understand what you just said, but as much as you can, that will be helpful, please.
We can do so.
Please, thank you.
Because if you don't ask, people can't tell, and I wouldn't want to see NBN Co running a don't ask, don't tell regime when it comes to these issues. Can I ask if your schedule of rates between NBN Co and Tier 1 delivery partners is a rate paid for the replacement of a fibre to the curb modem? Does it have a rate for that work in it?
We have rates that essentially, when you roll a truck, so essentially that's an activation of someone going and doing something, and depending on what activities need to be performed, there is a schedule of rates for that.
So if someone's been asked to go and do that work for no payment, the company, you would have paid someone along the line to do that work, even if the worker themselves doesn't actually get paid, because that's what you're telling me. Can I ask?
Senator, sorry, can I just thought of something? Can I just also add in that we have a whistleblower line on our hotline. It's on our website. It is taken very seriously. We have specific individuals who are then responsible under the legislation to look at those particular whistleblower issues.
But if a worker who was forced to do this work called that line...
No, it is anonymous, Senator. In fact,
I know, but how, and you follow up with that company, how do you remain confident that that person doesn't lose their job? It might be the only contractor in the area that they can work for.
Because under the obligations of the Public Interest Disclosure Act, the so-called PID, which runs the whistleblower, there is an obligation of the company to ensure that when a whistleblower wishes to stay anonymous, that our processes ensure that they're protected. So there would be processes put around that, Senator, and if it was, it actually wouldn't, we're not allowed under the legislation to do anything that would potentially lead to that person being uncovered who they are. So I think he can be assured that it would be managed in the way
would you
that
find them another
legislation
job
lays
with
out.
another contractor?
Well, we would. I'm not sure that that's our role to find a role for somebody else.
Well, it might be the only way you could protect them.
Senator, what we can do is take, if anybody wishes to send in a complaint to our whistleblower line, we will follow it appropriately.
Okay, it's my understanding that prime contracts stipulate a worker can't switch to another prime. It seems like you'd be in between a rock and a hard place when it comes to this work. Why is that the case?
No, I see quite commonly that subcontractors work for multiple prime contractors, so I don't see evidence of that occurring.
Oh, and what about an individual worker?
Again, on individual circumstances I couldn't comment, but...
If you can take on notice that you have a look at your primes, contracts and down that train to make sure that that's the case.
We could certainly ask the question.
Have you audited any recent contracts and found any issues in this regard?
In relation to, I guess...
Workers not being able to switch to another company?
Well, again, our audit compliance framework is ongoing, but in relation to that issue, we would look at the broader obligation, which is they are complying with, employment law and
Okay,
law.
well, if a worker's restricted from moving to another company, then there's no competitive labour there. Labour has no bargaining power because once they're signed up with one, they can't take their labour somewhere else. So in the context of primes, if you can take on notice, please, whether there are anything in their contracts that prevent workers from moving companies or within their subcontracts. In addition, if you can please, seeing as you have taken on notice to look at the issue of that unpaid work taking place, I would be grateful if you can give us a formal answer to that question on notice, and in turn I will try and get you as much information as I can about that allegation. So just to close on this matter,
Thank you.
have you audited any recent contracts in relation to primes and found any of these issues inside their contracts?
The audits that we conduct with our contractors focus on many different things. It focus on the compliance of our delivery partner to the obligations to NBN.
Okay, so a contract that means someone can't switch from one prime to another wouldn't be in your contracts with that prime. Are you able to look at their other contracts? Would it concern you if that kind of behaviour was going on between primes? So it can become an element of price fixing between them so that they can, it helps them kind of collude to fix prices and drive down their costs if they can control their own workers and prevent them from working from one company to another.
What I see is in fact the opposite of that. I see that subcontractors work for, it's just the way the contracting world works. Those subcontractors will work for 2 or 3 prime contractors. They often will work outside the industry as well, so that it won't...
I understand that. We're talking here also about individual workers and those contracts as well. You can't switch as a worker from one contractor to another. If you can have a look at those issues, and I'll try and get some detail on that.
Yeah, if you could please, Senator, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So Senator Pratt, Senator Van has a few questions, and I think Senator Kitching. Do you want to go for your questions now, Senator Kitching, and then I'll come back to Senator Van.
Thanks. Good morning. Happy Friday.
It's good to see you in person. You're normally on that black screen.
I
down
prefer
there.
being in person. I'm just going to traverse three areas. One is your responses to questions on notice, which I have to tell you is disappointing. I'm also going to go to the number of visits it takes to do a residential connection, and I'm also going to ask you about some all staff functions that you've had.
Sure.
And also just to put you on notice that I would like Mr Knox, it's also good to see you in person, and Mr Singh to come to budget estimates in May. So I don't want to really go through the hoo-ha we had to last year, to have Mr Knox come and Mr Singh. Thank you. So you're going to confirm that, aren't you?
Sure.
Thank you. Now, can I go to your question on notice 2766? Now, I asked you, this is despite the other problems we've had with questions on notice, but I asked you for the period, all connections in Victoria, how many individual residential connections are there to the NBN in Victoria? I know you might think your questions are better than my questions, but you responded to your own question, and your answer was for the period financial year 21 to date at 25 January 2021. I would like to know the full number, the individual residential connections to the NBN in Victoria. I did not mention financial year 21. I don't know where that came from. So could you please take it on notice and respond to my 2766 correctly?
Can I? Sorry, I'm trying to follow you.
Are we really going to? Okay. So
I'm sorry,
in question,
as of 25 January.
So question one, as at 25 January 2021, how many individual residential connections are there to the NBN in Victoria?
Yeah.
You've responded, for the period financial year 21 to date, bracket 25 January 2021, NBN Co Limited connected 1,426 blah, 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 premises to the NBN network.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you about the financial year, I asked you for the full number.
Would be the full number.
Sorry, who's that you're talking to?
I think that is the full number. Okay, Senator, let us take that on notice and see. If we haven't responded in the way you asked, I apologise, but I think we've tried to, but okay.
Maybe, are you asking over the period of history rather than
yes,
connections
from when,
in that financial year?
So
Senator Van, you don't need to help. So I asked you for the full number. For the full number. Thank you.
So what you're asking is, as at 25 January 2021, how many premises in Victoria are connected to NBN?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, as it states in the question.
Okay, let us check if we've answered that properly or not.
Well, you haven't. You've given me the financial year 21. You've given me 20 to 2021 financial year to date, 25 January, because of course I put this in January, and of course now we're in March, the end of March. So, I'm happy to accept to 25 January. I don't want to complicate this anymore.
Yeah, I think it's probably our language, Senator, because I wish we had connected 1.4 million premises.
I looked at
7 months.
So if you can confirm for me that 1.4 million is the full number of residential connections in Victoria.
I would have thought it was, but I will.
If you can check, that would be good. Now,
we'll double check that now, Senator. We'll get back. We'll hopefully get back to you by 12:15.
Oh, lovely, thank you. With new customers, and I'm going to give you an example. With new customers, what's the expectation in respect to the number of attendances required by someone from NBN Co to connect at a residential premise?
Sorry, Catherine.
So the expectation is, and again, this will vary from technology. So we do have on our HFC network, for example, and also on FTTC, we do have the opportunity to self-install. So it doesn't require a technician visit at all.
No, and I didn't limit it to technicians. What I want to know is, do most customers, and how do you manage this expectation, but do most customers expect to be visited once?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you've given me in response to question on notice 2766 that some people are receiving 10 attendances. Now I'm going to read you, this is from a very well-known broadcaster. I won't mention that person's name, but the media organisation and him, they were getting 2 connections in, and it took 16 visits. So even if I split that, because there was one from the media organisation, one from the individual, I split that and I get 8. Do you really think that's adequate?
Absolutely not.
Because it was extremely frustrating, not only for them but for their neighbours, because you also interfered with the copper in the whole street.
And that absolutely is extremely unusual. I would be more than happy to look into that example that you've given. Where we do find a customer requiring more than one appointment, what typically happens is the technician that will visit to do the connection, there is something unusual that they find. And those unusual things can range from the lead-in could be broken, there could be asbestos in the home, etc., etc. But I absolutely agree with you. 16 is a lot.
Mm. They also found, but down the street, that so the copper had broken and someone had helpfully used sticky tape to put it back together. So you can imagine the connectivity in the entire street was appalling. So I've got your response to, this is to 2766. So you've still got people getting 10 attendances to get a connection at a residential premise. I don't think that's...
Yeah, again, and I actually don't have the response in front of me right here, but...
That's why you need Mr Singh here.
Yeah. They are absolutely in the minority, but regardless, they shouldn't happen. And again, if I conduct post-incident reviews on unusual things in operations, and what we call our truck roll program is one of the areas that I focus on, because obviously that's an area of improvement, particularly for our customers and how we can do things better. But again, very unusual for multiple trucks to be required to activate a customer.
Is this why you're referring, Senator, to the 2 instances out of the 1.4 million?
And then you've got, but let's even go to, because, hang on, let me just put on my...
I mean, it's 2 out of 1.4 million, but it's too many.
Ms Dyer has
That's
also
true.
said that most customers expect 1 visit. So even if I go to 4 attendances, you've got 1,585 people who required 4 attendances.
Yep.
Then you've got 3 attendances. That was 7,616 residential premises that required 3 attendances. At 2 attendances, so double the number Ms Dyer has given us, you've got 49,831 Australian families hoping for a residential connection and having to be home. It's disruptive. You've said that your expectation is 1 visit, but from this chart, that's obviously not correct. But if you, in May estimates, in budget estimates, maybe you can give me some more data on whether that has improved, because I think this is year to date, this is to 25 January, so by the time we get to May estimates, you've got another couple of months. So I would like to see if, and I'd like you to take it on notice, to see if this has improved.
Sure. And if I can just add a couple of things
If you could
to
be
this.
very quick, please, Mr.
I just
Darwin.
want-
We
I've got- and I've
have
got one
11
more
minutes
question.
remaining, and we have 2 more questioners to
And
go.
I've got one more question because I just want to cover off on small staff events that
Very,
cost
very
a lot
quick,
of money.
please.
Sorry, what I was just quickly going to say there is that whilst you may think it's a simple visit to go and activate a customer, there are many things that could be required in some very complex installations. There could be, additional network shortfalls, no pit and pipe, etc., etc. So I do agree with that. The second part I was going to say is in relation to, the evolution of moving into an operational world. We have implemented a program internally that is absolutely looking at what we call truck roll efficiency and how we navigate and make sure that we've got the right skilled workforce in the right place to be able to perform the job. So it is doing pre-scoping of some of the work. It is making sure the right tech turns up, and it's making sure we can complete the work on the day. But by and large, the majority of our customers are having a good activation and assurance experience. And but again, I would be happy to come back and present on those numbers.
That would be helpful, and I think probably in this particular case that I'm giving you, it probably didn't help that someone, so an NBN contractor, because they're the ones in the pits, that someone used sticky tape to reattach, to get the copper back together. That's probably not optimal, I'm guessing.
Okay, can we keep moving
Can
on,
I just
please?
ask, I just want to ask about, you've given me, I'm looking now at question I noticed 2386, in relation to all staff events. The cost of the audio-visual equipment that was hired was $100,242.
I'm sorry, Senator. Can you tell me?
So
apologies.
2386, and I'm in response
2386.
paragraph 12. So you hired some audio-visual equipment for just over $100,000. You also, that was in June 2019. In June 2020, you hired audio-visual equipment for $69,000. But I want the entire cost. So you've given me the venue hire, which was $500,000.
Yeah.
What I would like to know is, I want to know all of the costs so in the 30 June 2019 and 30 June 2020, I want to know the full cost of those events.
Sure.
Because you've given me bits and pieces, which isn't really what I asked for again, but if you could respond to that and properly, that would be helpful. And I'll pass back to the Chair.
We will do our best.
Thank you. In the interest
Not do your best, Mr. Rue. I'd like you to answer it. You must have the
In the
detail.
interest of optimising transparency, Senator Van has agreed to put his questions on notice to give Senator Pratt the time till 1:15 to ask her questions.
Thank you. I'll be very swift. The 50 million in relief measures, COVID relief for residential financial hardship, has that expired? Is it still running?
That has expired, Senator.
Okay. The 50 million in support for small business to stay connected, is that wrapped up?
Yes, it has, Senator.
The 50 million for low-income families?
Yes, it has, although we are consulting with the industry regarding one of the pricing consultation is around a low-income product, Senator.
To access those relief offers, RSPs were required to provide data to NBN about the number of end users accessing the assistance packages. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, I believe it is.
How many businesses were assisted under the hardship offer?
We'll have to come back to you with the exact number, Senator.
How many telehealth services were upgraded under their offer?
Again, can we take that on notice and we'll respond to you?
Thank you. How many household premises were assisted under the relief measures for residential financial hardship?
Again, we'll take that on notice.
You don't have a general awareness of it now? It would seem like if it was a good story, you'd want to tell it now?
It was, I think it's fair to say that we had expected more. More businesses looking for relief and certainly more households. We were And I think that's probably attributable to the various arrangements that were put in place to support people through the COVID period.
Okay.
What I would say, though, was that I was I would have wanted to have seen more education packages sold, and it's certainly something that
Okay.
you know, Brad and I have talked about, you know, at length about getting the how does NBN and the retail industry work together around a low income package, but also around supporting families who need to educate children. And so this is important. It's important for me anyway, Senator, so if you don't mind. It goes to more than the NBN broadband experience. It also goes to the particular equipment that people may have in homes and also skill sets. And I do think it's something the industry needs to keep working on.
Can I ask, do you have an officer here who has the answers to the questions that I've asked?
They're so detailed, we'll have to take them on notice, Senator.
I'm surprised at that. I would have thought you'd had a story to tell in relation to that. Can I ask, in question on notice 330, NBN didn't answer the question about how many families, low-income families, were connected under those measures. If I can ask you to revisit that. It does seem like you've got an officer here who might have some data.
No, he's looking at the question notice for me.
Thank you.
So what we said was, as at 23 November, I think you're looking for an update. Is that what you're saying?
If you can give me the, you've got the answer to the question. We weren't happy with the answer. We didn't believe it adequately responded to our question. Can you tell us why you're right and we're not, if you think you've adequately answered
I think
it?
what we were asking is, we were waiting for the retailers to come back with all their claims, which we said we expected it to be at the end of the programme. So we clearly went to the end of the programme answering the question, and we answered as of 23 November.
The programme's now ended, so do you have that data now?
Well, I would have thought we would, so let me take that on notice and we'll come back to you with
Okay,
the
do you have the data with you now?
No, that's what you asked me earlier. It's detailed. We'll have to
It's
get
not
back to
because you don't want to release the figure?
Not at all. We don't have it with us.
Okay. Thank you. And in the context of your thank you for taking those other questions on notice today. And I just remind you that the Senate requires you to answer those questions unless you've made a very clear public interest immunity claim that can only be based on very specific grounds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. And thank you, Mr. Rue, and your team for being here this morning. You have agreed to take a number of questions on notice. I remind the 7th of May is the date for the return to the committee. And that concludes the committee's hearings for additional estimates of 2020-21 for the communications portfolio. Senators are reminded that written questions on notice should be provided to the Secretariat by the close of business on the 1st of April. I thank the Minister for your attendance, and officials from NBN. I thank committee members, the Secretariat, Hansard and Broadcasting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.